It begins not with light, but with the absence of it. There is a soft hiss in your ear, not quite wind, not quite breath, but the murmur of waking flies and the restless scrape of woven rushes against bare skin. The mat beneath you is uneven, and it has left its pattern on your back like a second skin, a relief map of sleep that didn't do what it was supposed to. The smell of the night still clings to everything, a warm, low, musty scent that mixes sweat, dust, the sourness of goatskins that once held beer, and the faint, unshakable trace of dung that has been trodden into the reed floor 100 days ago and never truly left. You are not fully awake yet, not in the modern sense. You exist in the in-between, limbs heavy and warm, mouth dry, stomach already muttering with the low, familiar ache of empty. You slept through the cool hours, when the air almost remembered what it was like not to smother. But now, already, the warmth is beginning to return, seeping back in like a rising tide. Soon, it will become that thick, slow heat that makes the clay walls sweat and the flies braver. Your fingers find grit as you stretch. Not sand exactly, but the kind of persistent particles that exist in ancient places. Dust that has been people. Ash that has been food. Your mat crinkles beneath your shifting weight, and from somewhere behind the thin partition, someone snores through their teeth. You think it might be your cousin, or your uncle, or someone who wasn't supposed to be sleeping here at all but is, because someone else died, or someone else moved in, and no one has the heart to ask questions anymore. They just snore and drool, and occasionally steal food they claim they didn't. The first sound you truly register, after the snore, after the hiss of flies, and the low creak of your spine, is your stomach. It complains without language. Just that hollow twist, that rolling suggestion that you should have eaten more last night. But there wasn't more to eat, so you chewed longer and pretended it was enough. You chew air now, instinctively, just to remember the motion. The inside of your mouth tastes of stale saliva and whatever you scraped off your teeth before bed. You sit up slowly, joints cracking like ancient pottery being pried apart, and you feel the rush of the morning air against your skin. Not cold, never cold, but cooler than what's coming. The air outside will bake. The walls inside will trap it. There is no good place to be, only places where you can sweat in slightly different positions. The roof is low, thatched with dry reeds packed together with mud and prayer. It breathes dust into your face when you move, and the beams above your head have absorbed centuries of sun and smoke. You duck your head instinctively as you rise, but still bump it anyway. A kiss of splinters against scalp, just to remind you who's in charge. You blink hard, not because you're tired, but because your eyes are crusted from sleep and smoke and whatever else floats through the air when you live this close to everything. Your feet find the floor, rough, uneven, cool for now. You step over a small pile of laundry, not yours, not clean, probably not moving, and shuffle past a basket of broken pottery shards someone insists will be useful. Maybe they will be. Maybe that's dinnerware now. You don't ask. You just step around the goat droppings near the door and squint into the room. The family is beginning to stir. A few bodies rustle beneath linens too thin to matter. A child coughs. Another mutters something that might be a dream or a protest. Your mother, or someone acting like her today, is already stooping over the hearth, not lighting a fire, because you don't waste fuel when the sun is about to do it for free. Just scraping out the last bits of yesterday's mush from the pot with a stick that might once have been a spoon. You swallow, hoping it will be enough to quiet your gut. It isn't. There was barley bread last night. Not much. The kind that turns to gravel in your molars and swells like regret in your stomach. You chewed it dutifully with the slow, tired jaws of someone who's eaten it every day of their life. But it never lasts. Not past the next breath. not past the heat that dries out your body from the inside out and leaves you chasing moisture like a dog after its tail. You think you remember a few lentils in the mix, or maybe they were pebbles. You didn't ask. You step outside. The sun isn't up yet, but the light is. That watery, soft-edged haze that turns the Nile into a wide, shivering ribbon of silver. The air smells of dew, but not the sweet kind, more like damp that got tired halfway through becoming mold. Your nostrils twitch. You look toward the clay oven near the edge of the yard and wonder if it's too early to hope for something baking. But there's no smoke, just the silence of dough that never rose. The neighbor's rooster, who is not a rooster, just a very angry goose, honks like he's been personally insulted by dawn. You hear the clatter of something dropped next door and someone swearing under their breath in a tone that sounds a lot like prayer. You feel the world unfolding itself like a reed mat, full of creases and unfinished business. Breakfast will be whatever is left. A smear of cheese, perhaps, if the pot hasn't soured. Beer, flat and weak, with the color of something you'd rather not name. It will be poured into a chipped cup and passed around, and you will sip it like it matters, like it does something more than coat your tongue in bitterness and make you wonder if the aftertaste is yeast or just yesterday. You return inside as others begin to move. The older ones grumble like chairs being dragged across stone. The younger ones beg for dates, but there are none. They were all eaten by someone whose hands were faster than yours. The jar is empty. The sticky residue on its rim is a cruel memory. You glance toward the corner where the grain jar sits, and even the mice look disappointed. You sit near the hearth. The pot is warm now, but only from stirring. A few bubbles break the surface, beans or insects. It's too early to tell. You dip a finger in and taste. It's bland, thick, slightly sour. It tastes like duty. The flies know it's breakfast too. They circle, land, scatter. You don't bother swatting. It's their home as much as yours. Probably more. They never pay for anything and still eat better. Someone hands you a bite of bread, and it feels like an apology. You nod thanks, but do not speak. There's no point wasting moisture on words. You chew, chew, chew. You swallow without joy. It hits your stomach with all the satisfaction of a stone in a bucket. The morning stretches ahead like the road to the temple, hot, uneven, full of strangers you're expected to smile at. There will be work. There is always work. But first, there will be pretending this is enough, that this meal means something, that the grumble in your gut is gratitude and not warning. The light grows stronger now. Shadows shrink into corners. The fire has caught, but it offers no warmth. Just smoke that climbs the walls and lingers in your hair, your nose, the corners of your eyes. Your sibling mutters something about more beans, then decides silence is safer. You agree. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand and consider licking your fingers, but think better of it. They taste like salt and something older. You press them into your lap and feel the rumble in your gut echo again, softer now. Not because it's satisfied, just because it's tired. The pot is scraped clean again. The crumbs are gone. The cup is empty. You stare at it and think about how much it once held, and how little it does now. The air is warmer now. You can feel it rising, thickening, taking up space where breath should be. The door is open, and the dust is awake. It floats in lazy spirals through beams of morning light, and you watch it as your stomach coils one last time around the idea of food. The kind you dream of, the kind you'll never have. You stand. Tomorrow, you'll be hungry again. But first, there's today. And just outside, the next chapter waits in the shade, with bread that's somehow even harder than this. The hunger from the morning never truly fades. It only stretches, thinning out like the last thread of a worn tunic, pulled tighter with each movement, each breath. There is no second breakfast, no secret stash, just the promise of bread, or at least something claiming to be bread. You sit beside the wall's cool plaster, the faint scent of yesterday's smoke clinging to your skin like a second, less wanted garment. The sun has climbed higher, but it hasn't brought comfort. Only glare, the kind that bounces off whitewashed stone and makes everything feel both dry and sticky. Your skin, your mouth, your patience. The air hums faintly with flies, which seem to prefer your face to the sour goat milk left out to curdle near the door. You are handed a round thing. It is technically food. You know this because you have seen others eat it. Sometimes without grimacing. Sometimes it is dense. The kind of dense that defies gravity. If dropped, it could crack the floor. Or your toe. It has a crust that resists fingers like sun-baked clay, and a color suspiciously close to sand mixed with ash. You hold it, weighing it like a weapon or a tool, not entirely convinced it's meant to be chewed. It is called bread, but it doesn't behave like bread, not like the soft, air-pocketed dreams whispered about by richer households, or by that one neighbor who once traveled north and came back insufferable. No, this is bread in the same way a rock is a pillow, functional, durable, emotionally disappointing. You press a thumb into it. Nothing happens. No give. No forgiveness. You gnaw the edge. It fights back. The taste is ancient, like it has absorbed every story the floor has ever heard. Gritty, faintly sour, and somewhere in there, unmistakably, a crunch that should not be there. You chew slower, not out of enjoyment, but out of caution. Was that a grain? A pebble? A tiny fossil? Across the dusty courtyard, someone laughs. You don't look up. You already know who it is. The cousin with too many teeth and too few chores. They always find bread funny. Maybe they've learned to enjoy the suffering. Maybe it's a defense mechanism. Or maybe their jaw is just stronger. You make a note to resent them later. When you aren't concentrating so hard on swallowing. The bread scratches your throat like a particularly abrasive papyrus scroll. You want water, but the jar is warm and smells faintly of yesterday's onions. You sip anyway. You always do. It helps with the chewing, not the taste. Nothing helps with the taste. The bread, they say, is life. They don't say whose life, or how many teeth it's claimed. You imagine it will survive you. Buried in the sand, just beneath your grave, future diggers will find it intact, unbitten, still smug. A chicken passes by, feathers dusty and tail feathers proud. Even it looks at your bread with suspicion, as if to say, that's not food. You don't disagree, but you eat it anyway. That's the rule. Bread in the morning, bread when the sun is highest, bread when it sinks, bread if you're lucky, and sometimes bread when you're not. You remember once seeing a beetle crawl out of the cracks in one. You were 4. You told no one. You ate around it. You learned. There is no soft part. There is only the illusion of soft. A region perhaps marginally less fortified. You aim for that. Your jaw aches. Your stomach waits, uncertain whether it wants the offering or not. It will take it. It always does. Eventually. This bread isn't made for pleasure. It's made for permanence, for economy, for survival. It is flour and water and time and ash. Sometimes lentils, when there are lentils. Sometimes other things. You've stopped asking. Your mother used to say that bread tastes better when you've made it yourself. She lied. You've made it. It doesn't help. Watching the paste crack and bubble in the sun-heated clay oven, smelling the smoke cling to its sides, knowing the way the dirt from the floor joins the mixture no matter how clean your hands are. None of it helps. Your teeth protest. You chew anyway. You once saw a wealthier woman throw her bread to the dogs. They didn't eat it. They sniffed it. They nudged it. One tried. He gave up. You respected him for it. Still, there is something comforting in its sameness. You know this bread. You've known it longer than some family members. It has never changed. It never will. It will wait for you. Always. on good days and bad. On days when your belly growls like the neighbor's goat, and on days when you feel too tired to want anything at all. And somehow, you do finish it. There's nothing left but the gritty echo in your molars and a faint warmth in your chest, the kind that could be nourishment, or just the illusion of it. The chickens wander, the flies stay, a child somewhere wails, possibly because they were also handed bread. You do not blame them. You pick at the corner of your tunic, watching the crumb dust fall like crushed stone. You don't bother brushing it off. It will blend in. Everything here does. Even you. In the distance, you hear someone shaping dough again. You recognize the thump, the soft curse, the wet slap against the clay surface. Tomorrow's bread is already beginning. Tomorrow's jaw ache. Tomorrow's strange crunch. You know this will happen again, and again, and again. You sigh. The kind of sigh that has weight. The kind that has chewed through too many loaves that could survive an apocalypse. The day moves on. You feel none of it. Somewhere just beyond your reach, the sun begins to bake the next meal, and it smells, faintly, of hope, and dust, and the same bread, still warm, still unforgiving, still waiting. The sun has barely risen, though it's hard to tell where night ends and day begins when the haze is always the same dull smear across the horizon. The dust doesn't care what time it is. It creeps in through the smallest cracks in the mud brick walls, clinging to your eyelashes, your nostrils, your very breath. You rub your eyes with the back of your wrist, only managing to shift the discomfort rather than erase it. And in your stomach, a slow, familiar ache that feels less like hunger and more like an ongoing argument between your ribs and your spine. You know what's coming. You've known since last night, and the night before that, and the week before that. Because what comes every morning is gruel. It is always gruel. There is no variation, no garnish, no joyful surprise of a new flavor. It is simply there, as constant as the sun, but far less warm. A grayish sludge, barely heated, barely seasoned, barely edible, and yet you eat it, because not eating it would be worse. The pot squats over yesterday's ashes, which are stirred to reluctant life with a few brittle reeds and a breath that smells like sleep and survival. You don't remember the last time the pot was fully scrubbed. Perhaps it was never scrubbed. Perhaps it is simply accumulating the memory of every morning in its iron skin, one layer of soot and regret at a time. You pretend that means it has flavor. You lie to yourself in small ways. It helps. Your hands are stiff this morning. The joints feel swollen from sleeping curled on the packed earth, and the air still clings with the chill that no linen wrap could chase away. You move like someone twice your age, and in this world, that's not hard to imagine, since age creeps faster here, pulled along by sun and hunger and the repeated indignities of daily life. The wooden bowl passed to you is warm on the bottom and cold on the top, like its contents. The texture is something between paste and memory. You hold the bowl under your nose for a moment, searching for the scent of grain, barley maybe, or lentils. But mostly you smell dampness and faint smoke and something you once hoped was garlic, though by now it might be mold. There is a spoon, but it doesn't help. The spoon is flat and cracked. You chew your breakfast like it's making a point. And it is. The point is, this is what you get. The gruel has no intention of impressing you. It's not here to delight. It's here to keep you going. And just barely at that. You swallow each bite like it's an apology your stomach refuses to accept. Someone coughs in the next room, dry and repetitive. It sounds like they've been trying to clear their throat since the reign of the last pharaoh. The sound bounces off clay walls and settles somewhere behind your eyes. There is always someone coughing, always someone scratching, always someone muttering about the next flood or the last one, or the goat who won't stop staring like she knows what you did last summer, or last harvest at least. You lick the spoon, you lick the bowl, you chew on a crust of yesterday's bread that might also be last month's. It tastes like it was carved from the side of a mud brick. You dip it in the gruel, but that just gives it the consistency of chewed papyrus. Your jaw clicks. You pretend it's satisfying. The children nearby don't bother pretending. They whine and nudge each other and whisper about honey cakes they've never tasted, describing them with the vivid confidence of those who live solely in dreams. You envy them. You did the same once. Imagine dates stuffed with nuts, fresh figs split open under the sun, even roasted fish flaking off the bone like blessings. Now you dream smaller. You dream of gruel that's slightly warmer, of a morning where the bowl isn't chipped, of the day you don't have to scrape the bottom for the last gritty mouthful. Outside, the wind is beginning to wake. It howls through the narrow gaps between buildings, dragging the sand behind it like a petulant child with a broken toy. The sun is rising, but it's not gentle. It slams against the world like a door that doesn't fit its frame. You shield your eyes and squint toward the river, though you know the day holds no new mercy. Just more sun, more dust, more work, and, tomorrow, more gruel. You stretch your back and feel something pop that probably shouldn't. The bowl clinks as you set it beside the pot, careful not to look at what remains. It's better not to see the gruel when it's cold. That's when it becomes honest. That's when it stops pretending to be food and becomes something else. A punishment, a ritual, a reminder that nothing ever truly improves. It just thickens. You pick a grain from your teeth. You're not sure if it's barley or sand. At this point, it doesn't matter. The texture is identical, and either way, it's going back into the gruel pot tonight, or the night after that, until one of you wins. In the corner, the goat blinks at you. She knows. She always knows. Her breath smells worse than the gruel, but at least she doesn't pretend otherwise. You respect her honesty. She huffs and turns away, offended by your scrutiny, or maybe just bored by your suffering. She's seen better humans. Probably. You think about what she'd say if she could talk, but you already know. Something dry. Something unhelpful. The smell of the ashes sticks to your hair. You try to braid it, but your fingers keep catching on knots made of sleep and humidity. You tie it anyway. It doesn't matter if it looks good. Nothing looks good here. Even the sunlight arrives dusty. A neighbor clatters by outside, muttering about something. Always muttering. His sandals flap against the ground like the wings of an old, tired bird. He smells faintly of fish and judgment. You nod without meaning it, and he doesn't notice. You think about lunch. You shouldn't. It's going to be the same. Maybe thinner. Maybe with fewer bits. Maybe with one accidental weevil. The protein of the poor. You remind yourself that the nobles eat honey and roast goose, and somehow that doesn't comfort you. You remind yourself that envy is a sin, but you're not convinced hunger counts as a sin anyway. Not when it never leaves. There's a faint stain on your tunic, a splash from the gruel that escaped your spoon's half-hearted grip. You scrape at it with a fingernail and only succeed in moving it around. You sigh. Or maybe that's just your default state of breath now. A long, slow resignation that never quite ends. A child sneezes somewhere. Someone else curses them for wasting air. You consider returning to your mat, curling into the warmth that still lingers in the reed-woven depression your body left behind. But you know better. The gruel only delays things. It doesn't restore. You're not fuller. You're simply less empty. And soon, it will be time to grind more grain, fetch more water, scrape more pans. Life in ancient Egypt is structured like a recipe you didn't choose. A cup of effort, a spoon of suffering, a dash of sand, and endless, endless servings of gruel. Outside, the world is already sweating. Inside, your stomach has stopped complaining. Not because it's content, but because it's given up. And somehow, that feels worse. But you'll eat again later, gruel again, and again, and then again. And eventually, without noticing, you'll learn to stop expecting anything else. You try to swallow, and it scrapes like linen left in the sun too long. There's a sour taste clinging to the back of your throat, the sort of tang that says you've breathed in more ash than air. Your tongue, dry and reluctant, presses against your teeth like it's trying to protest your life choices. But there are no choices. Only morning, and whatever passes for drinkable today. Your hands are already crusted with yesterday. The dust that never quite leaves. The faint smell of millet porridge that's grown into your skin. And the sting of sleep still sitting behind your eyes, blooming like the heat from a forge you weren't invited to. You haven't spoken yet this morning. No one has. Except maybe the goat, who makes conversation more consistently than your brother. She stared at you earlier with the same look she reserves for rotting turnips. Mild judgment and inevitable acceptance. Your feet are sore from the walk you haven't taken yet, which is just how things go now. The soles of your calloused skin remember every errand in advance. You move like someone who's been doing this for decades, which is impressive, considering how few of you live that long. The sun is barely over the huts, but it's already planning its assault. You can feel it waiting behind the clouds, smirking. By noon, it'll bake the mud into your spine and cook whatever hope you didn't leave behind in your bedroll. You pick up the clay cup. It's cracked. Of course it's cracked. Everything is, including your patience. But you cradle it like it's precious, because it is. The brown liquid inside sloshes with a weight that's more familiar than comforting. It's warm, always warm, as if it too has been slowly dying in this heat. It smells sour, yeasty, alive somehow, which is more than you can say for the river water. The water, you know, is a gamble, a wet roll of the dice, seasoned with sand, fish parts, and regret. You've seen what it does to people. The neighbor's boy, the one with eyes like fig pits and a laugh too loud for his age, was drinking from a clay jug last week. Not even a full sip. And now he's lying in a corner of their hut, breathing like the air hurts. He hasn't laughed since. You can't remember the last time anyone mentioned his name above a whisper. So you drink the beer. It's not the kind you've heard stories about. No golden bubbles, no cheer in a glass. This is not celebration. This is fermentation as survival. The grains are still floating in it. Tiny, bloated reminders that someone crushed and soaked and stirred them for days in a pot that has never truly been clean. The smell is vaguely reminiscent of wet bark and old bread, with an undercurrent of something like mildew and dreams deferred. You sip slowly. Not out of reverence, you're just trying not to gag. The taste is bitter, but your mouth is so dry it barely notices. The texture is what gets you. Thick, clumpy. It's like someone chewed your drink first and then kindly handed it back. But it will keep you alive. Probably. Across the courtyard, someone coughs. A wet sound, sticky and lingering. You don't turn your head. You already know who it is. She's been coughing since the last flood. Probably before. Some say it's the dust. Others say it's the spirits. You think it's the water, or the absence of it, or the life it pretends to hold. The goat is watching you again. She always does this when you drink the beer, as if she knows it's supposed to be sacred, or maybe she just wants the dregs. It's hard to tell with goats. You lower your cup and wipe your mouth with the back of your hand. It doesn't help. The sourness is now a part of you. Someone is pounding something nearby. Maybe grain. Maybe someone's dignity. You can't tell anymore. The rhythmic thud, thud, thud blends with the sound of sandals shuffling, a baby crying half-heartedly, and a woman muttering to herself about a stain that won't come out. This is the soundtrack of morning. You remember once, when you were smaller and hope still seemed edible, you tried to scoop water straight from the canal. It shimmered so beautifully in the sun, like liquid gold with a hint of mystery. You only took a few gulps. But that night, your stomach rolled like a storm on the horizon. You thought you'd die. Your mother thought you deserved to. You learned quickly that beautiful things in this world are rarely safe. Now the beer is your friend, a strange, burping, frothy friend with questionable hygiene, but a friend nonetheless. It's part of every meal, which is to say, it is the meal. You dream of cold drinks, clean drinks, water that doesn't smell like regret. But here, dreams cost more than barley. Your sister stumbles out of the hut behind you, hair tangled like a bird's nest that gave up halfway. She eyes your cup and grimaces. She'll drink her own soon enough. But first, she mutters something unintelligible, scratches her hip, and walks off in the direction of whatever chore you'll both be pretending to enjoy today. Likely something involving grain. It's always grain. Grain and dust and sun and more grain. You take another sip. It goes down easier this time. Maybe your tongue has given up. Maybe you have. A fly lands on the rim of the cup and regards you with ancient disdain. You don't bother swatting it. Everything else is already dead inside. Why not the beer too? The morning stretches on. You move through it like syrup left too long in the sun. Slowly, reluctantly. The beer sloshes in your belly, thick and sour and strangely comforting. You can feel it settling, trying to become one with your organs, trying to remind them they still have a job to do. You set the cup down carefully, balancing it on a stone that's been pretending to be a table for generations. The clay sticks to your fingers. Your breath smells like old wheat and newer disappointment. You wipe your hands on your tunic and feel the crust of yesterday flake off in soft, dusty clouds. Above you, the sky is beginning to glow, not with beauty, but with intent. It will be hot soon. Hot enough to make your beer bubble. Hot enough to make you forget there's anything else. But for now, your thirst is dulled. Not quenched. Never that. But dulled enough to survive until the next cup, and the one after that. Eventually, you will walk to the edge of the courtyard and stare at the canal. You'll see the ripples. You'll think, just for a moment, about dipping your fingers in. But you won't. You know better. The beer may be terrible, but it hasn't tried to kill you yet. And that's enough. For now. The breeze shifts, carrying the scent of warm straw, stale sweat, and something fermenting that probably shouldn't be. You close your eyes, not in peace, but in resignation. Tomorrow's beer will taste the same, if you're lucky. And somewhere, in the silence that follows, a gnat buzzes by your ear. The only thing in the village with more bitterness than your drink. The damp dawn presses through woven shutters, soft and reluctant, edging your vision like the slow thaw of river ice under a meek sun. Before the sun has climbed enough to warm bare feet, you stand in the narrow yard where the garden waits, not like a promise of beauty, but like an altar to necessity, a muddy patch stitched between cracked stone where life and hunger wrestle for every inch. Your fingers brush against the stalk of a pale onion shooting from the earth. It trembles beneath your touch, a thin white tremor, as fragile as hope. Beneath your nails the soil is cool and grainy, each small pebble a remnant of seasons past, pebbles you've turned and sifted through 1,000 times, each one an echo of a careworn sigh. The scent of wet dirt fills your nostrils, heavy with the must of composted scraps. Apple cores, stale bread, chicken bones. You and the kitchen maid before you press them into the earth in hopes that life might return. There is no flourish here, no patterned rows or trimmed hedges, only bedraggled shoots and the hum of survival. A neighbor's goat stands just beyond the fence, its bleat low and familiar, as if reminding you of the bargain struck between weed and blade, water and hungry mouth. The goat's eyes are golden with indifference and familiarity. Your presence here is routine. You reach for handfuls of green shoots, leek, parsley, something that might be thyme, and snap them cleanly. Your mouth tastes the damp bitterness of leaf and early frost. It isn't flavor, it's life. You kneel, mud marking the knees of your rough dress, the cloth soaked through to your skin. Cold seeps, a slow creep, but you welcome its knowledge. It tells you you're awake, tells you the day has begun, tells you you must meet it. Your breath pools in the air, warm and thick, ghosts that dissipate with your murmured wish for enough. Not more, just enough. Beside you, hidden in the low wooden crate, are dried pods, peas, fava beans, brittle husks that crack in your palm, releasing faint aromas of summer's warmth, now distant as a dream. You pinch a few seeds and crush them between thumb and forefinger, releasing an earthy perfume that reminds you of bean soup simmering in the hearth, the spoon clinking against coarse clay, the soft exhale of your sister as she leans over the bowl, half asleep in the warmth. You can almost smell the steam again, almost hear the distant goats bleat through the open barn door. Every plant here is a currency of survival. You pull out a withered carrot, its orange dull and cracked. You remember once when you tasted sweet carrot raw, something rare as a lullaby in this world. Now, the rind is tough, almost fibrous, like chewing dried rope. But still, you place it in your apron for tonight's stew. No one praises it, but without it, the stew would be an insult. The garden's edge is a boundary between the world you scrub and the world you cannot control. Beyond, the fields stretch toward the river. Beyond that, what you do not speak. Ambushes, raiders, cold winters, the sea's promises. But here, your hands move in circles of routine. You hoe under a stubborn weed whose roots dig deep. You breathe through the pinch of its base, remembering the root of your own life, worn by labor, steeped in necessity, certain only in its own persistence. The gardener, your closest companion in this narrow world, is not a person. It is the thought, I must not fail. It is a rhythm humming beneath the sweat on your brow, beneath the ache in your back, beneath the dull throb in your fingers from years of labor. It is older than your bones and cradled in your blood. It is what makes each plant worth the pain. You step back and survey the row you freed from choking weeds. It is small, 2 feet of green life, 1 foot of open soil, one flowering that might produce seeds for spring. Perhaps not enough, but no one will notice. That is its quiet value. Morning light shifts. Across the fence, the goat shifts too and steps forward, sniffing the air, as though it knows the length of your world and finds it wanting. You brush the goat's coarse head with the back of your hand and find comfort in its indifference again, an animal unaware that tomorrow may hold more hunger or less water. It lives by impulse and stomach, not by worry. You envy it momentarily, then remember that you too are impulse and necessity, wired into a cycle older than any barn beam. You carry buckets of river water back to the crate of seedlings, each footfall a measured prayer of weight and balance. The wooden bucket is cracked and leaks cold drips onto the flagstones, silent markers of your passage. The water scents of mud and riverweed, tinted green by algae and memory. A scent you have learned to find sweet, though it's not pleasant. It says life. It says renewal. It says we are not done yet. In the corner of your eye, you see the cook's lantern swinging across the threshold of the kitchen, a soft promise of hearth and stew. You feel your heartbeat hitch, a reminder that tonight's meal, thin broth, salted meat, root vegetables, depends on your hands and the mercy of this patch. And still, deep within, you taste the bitterness of the garden's truth. Beauty died in the push of soil. Survival hums low and gray. The goat's bleat breaks you from your reverie, and you laugh softly, the sound half tear, half lingered relief. You drop your head and laugh again, because absurdity feels like a friend in this quiet moment, because you've spent your life coaxing sweetness out of dirt, because it seems fashionable for the cosmos to remind you again and again that what blooms here is not optional. The morning shifts, the horizon brightens, the shadows slither from your patch of green to the crumbling wall. You stand, hands trembling, thighs heavy. You water again, because tomorrow you will do this again, and maybe only this, pull weed, save seed, coax root, will define whether you last another day in the cold, cracked world outside. You step back, breathing in the cloying scent of growth and earth, the silent heartbeat of plants that do not promise comfort, only existence. You feel the pause before the day's next labor. Your hands are aching, your back pulls, but your heart hums. You have done what is unseen. You have kept the patch alive. You have held hunger at bay for one more sunrise. And as your sister ducks apparition-like around the corner, her form softened by lantern glow, carrying a bowl of thin soup so familiar it is nearly a lullaby, you realize beauty may not live here, but survival sings in this garden's hush, a melody only you can hear. The onions are everywhere, lining the edges of the plot like sentries. Their stiff green stalks lurch toward the sun with more confidence than you feel in your own posture. You press your palm to your lower back, which hums in quiet protest, a dull ache that began 2 seasons ago and never fully left. Your fingers smell of soil and something sharp. You scratch your cheek, and now your face smells like onions too. There's something about Egyptian soil that holds on to heat even in the early hours, a low simmer that rises from beneath your sandals. You kneel beside the leeks, thinner than you'd like, barely more than reeds, and tug at the roots, not with hope, but with resignation. They are stringy, bitter things, better suited to boiling than anything that might resemble enjoyment. Still, they'll fill the pot. Eventually. Hopefully. The little clay pot beside you is already half full with trimmings, insect-bitten herbs, and limp stalks you wouldn't serve to anyone, which, in a way, they have. Or rather, the hunger has. A neighbor's rooster screams in the distance, or maybe it's your neighbor herself. You're not sure which is louder. Her laugh follows like a scythe through grain, sudden and slicing. You don't turn. You've learned not to. If it's gossip, it'll reach your ears soon enough, like all things in this tight-knit, dry-mouthed village. There's a fig tree that never produces enough. It stands at the back like a forgotten guest, its branches brittle from the wind that drags the desert into your life one gust at a time. You pass it each morning, brush your fingers over its leaves, leathery, thirsty things, and wonder how something that old can be so stubbornly unhelpful. It's like the eldest of your relatives, offering advice instead of sustenance. You shift again, wincing. The garden is small, but every inch of it presses its weight onto you, not just in labor, but in meaning. This patch isn't for beauty, though the occasional blossom might fool an outsider. This patch is for survival, for stretching one loaf into 2, for pretending the bitterness of wild herbs is just acquired taste, for reminding yourself every morning that your belly may grumble, but it has not yet caved in. Somewhere nearby, a goat makes a sound that can only be described as judgmental. You glance sideways, and there she is, the one with the lopsided ear and the uncanny ability to stare into your soul. She's chewing something that doesn't belong to her. Again, you offer a flat glare and a muttered threat you have no intention of following through on. She's lived through harsher winters than you have. She'll live through this one too. A breeze stirs and lifts the dust. It stings your ankles, mixes with the faint, sour scent of compost and sweat. You close your eyes a moment, breathe it all in. Not because it's pleasant, but because it's real. You've learned the difference. Real doesn't ask for your opinion. It just is. You brush the soil from your knees and shift to the next row. Radishes, maybe. or what's left of them. They grow crooked, like teeth in need of a village priest and a length of string. You pull one free and examine it, bulbous, cracked, hot like pepper and regret. But it's food, and today, food is enough. The sun has started to creep over the boundary wall, inching its way across the clay like a golden snail. The light doesn't warm you. Not yet. It only reminds you how much more of the day you still owe to this patch of earth. The child from the next household toddles past, barefoot and sticky with dates. She waves with a hand covered in sap and then promptly falls into a shallow ditch. Her mother doesn't rush. Neither do you. Falling is part of it. Learning which soil is soft, which rocks bite back, which ants sting. The child cries like she's just discovered betrayal, then climbs out again, quieter now, wiser. Maybe. Your stomach curls again, a reminder that even labor doesn't earn immediate reward. You reach for a strip of dried fig from your satchel, tough as leather, sweet as memory, and chew until your jaw feels like it's doing something worthwhile. It isn't filling, not really, but it keeps your mouth busy while the sun climbs and your knees ache and your stomach continues its whispered protest. Someone's baking nearby. You can smell the yeast, sour and warm, curling through the air like a promise. You can't afford to trade for it, not today. But the smell alone gives you enough to imagine it. Thick crust, dense crumb, warmth cupped in your palms like treasure. And sometimes, imagining is all you get. The garden is quieter now, the insects less insistent, the birds settling into their shady corners. You take a slow step back, feel the pull of your spine and the weight of your breath. The patch looks no fuller than before, and yet your basket is heavier. It will never be enough, not truly, but it will be something. And something, in this world, is survival. You wipe your hands on your tunic and stare at the dirt clinging to your nails, the little half-moons of labor. No one will thank you for this. The food will disappear before the pot cools. But the garden won't forget. It never does. It remembers every heel, every broken root, every dropped seed and buried wish. And when you're gone, properly gone, not just from the patch but from this world, it will still be here, still stubborn, still dry, still trying. You glance one last time at the goat. She's watching the fig tree now, scheming. You shake your head and turn away, basket in hand, stomach still echoing the morning. Another day waits, another row of discomfort, another meal that might not come. But for now, the air tastes like dust and faint sweetness. For now, that's enough. The ground behind you holds the shape of your knees. The silence between footsteps holds the memory of roots, and the path forward hums with the sound of a distant pot beginning to boil. A slow step forward finds you leaning into the now familiar ache in your knees, the uneven stone floor pressing against the soft soles of your sandals. The early light filters through the slatted shutters, bright enough to show the blemishes on every piece of worn clay and rough-hewn wood, dim enough to leave most shapes indistinct. Somewhere in the hush, you hear the low hum of your own breath, as though the half-darkness has swallowed all sharp edges and left only soft exhalations. Your head still feels thick from yesterday's gruel, and some part of you wonders if your stomach will ever remember how to ask for anything different. But today is not gruel day. Today, if you're lucky, today is cheese day. If you're brave, you shift the small clay jar in your hands, feeling its uneven shape, the slight wobble of its unglazed rim brushing your fingertips. It's not much, just a pinch of curds you hope haven't soured in the corner of the storeroom. You learned yesterday, or the day before, how quickly something meant to preserve life can morph into its opposite. Still, there's a fragile thrill in the possibility that this isn't spoiled milk, but something approaching meal. It's a precarious hope, like balancing a sack of grain on your hip while walking on a narrow ledge. The goat is nearby, lowing in that judgmental tone you've come to recognize as her default setting. You don't bother turning. You already know her stare is congealed disapproval. She's the reason half the curds go missing before you can even measure them. You could try to hide them better, but between the cracks in the jars and the wobble of the stone shelves, she always finds a way. You breathe in slowly, tasting dust and stale onion from before planting, and swallow the lump of longing that lives just behind your sternum. You crouch to cross the threshold into the storeroom, the doorframe sticky with sun-warmed sap. The air inside is cooler, drier, tinged with the sour promise of fermented things and the faint memory of salted fish. You don't look at the jars. Curiosity can be cruel, but let your hand hover close enough to count how many still hold the pale, crumbly shapes you need. 5, maybe 6. Enough if you ration. This cheese isn't the creamy kind you might imagine. There's no fresh mozzarella or soft chèvre in this world. Instead, it's hard, crumbly curds pressed into thin discs, pale as bone, each one lined with flecks of ash or mildew or ancient mold. You take one, rolling it between your fingers until it breaks at the center with the brittle sigh of dried mud. A powdery fragment coats your palm. The goat nudges your leg, a deliberate move. You ignore her, keep your attention on the jar. You want this to taste like something besides loss. You want it to hold warmth. You cup it to your cheek first, letting its chill seep through your skin. It's colder than you expected. You bring it closer to your lips, your breath lifting brief curls of steam from the cracked surface. The scent is muted. Milky, yes, but also dusty. Faintly there's bitterness like overboiled greens. You close your eyes and taste it, biting into the disc until it crumbles, letting the fragments scatter across your tongue, crunching like dry earth. It's saltier than sea spray, grit like the edge of distant roads. You almost laugh, something cracked and gleeful, like a child who tasted the sea for the first time and realized not all water feels like water. The ash, if that's what it is, leaves behind a ghost of wood smoke, a whisper in the memory of long nights by the hearth. The edges sting your gum, but it's life, not abundant, not pleasant, but definite. You swallow. The room exhales around you. You stand slowly, breathing with the walls. The jars stand like sentries behind you, empty or half full. You could take more. You probably should take more. But you hesitate. A tremor passes through your bones, not from cold, but from the weight of decisions. Curds left behind might be spoiled. Curds taken might leave you hungry tomorrow. You cup the rest of the broken disc in your palm, roll a few extra crumbs across your tongue. You can feel your stomach stretching, reminding you that even crumbs can fill the space. The goat moves off, satisfied or bored. It's hard to tell. She bleats once, a brief punctuation in the silence. You run your fingers along the shaft of the jar, tracing the irregular seam where the clay had cracked, patched, sealed. Someone before you had tried to fix it. You think of the hands that smoothed that seam, the patient kneading of clay, the hope that it would stay whole a little longer. Hope is an inheritance. Not much, but sometimes that's enough. You step back into the main room. The sun is stronger now, painting golden rectangles onto the floor. You set the jar on a board beside your mat, letting the sunlight warm it until the clay glows faintly. You settle across from it, the jar between your knees, and lean forward so the light pools on the disc inside. The warmth bleeds into the curds. The lines between cold jar and breaded disc blur. You nibble again, each crumb a soft punctuation. You chew with awareness, tasting the salt and ash separately, then together, like threading black beads on a chalky string. It's bitter, but not entirely. There's a smoother current beneath, a whisper of sweetness you can't quite place. Maybe the ghost of hay from the goat barn, the very mild tang of a milk unspoiled. You chew until your teeth ache, until your jaw loosens, and now there's space for something else. A slow, hollow lull in the hunger. You breathe out. Behind you, through shuttered slats, you hear the murmur of water, the well being drawn, a jug sliding across stone. You close your eyes and imagine carrying that jug, wrists rounded from cold, arms humming with loaded weight. You picture the muddy arc of the village well, the worn stones curved by centuries of hands. The murmur becomes rhythm, slow and steady, and the cheese on your tongue softens in the sun-warm room. You lean your head back, letting the light dot your eyelids like constellations. The taste of cheese lingers, a fragile bridge between yesterday's pot and tomorrow's loaf. A pause in the constant treadmill of hunger. A moment that's unexpected and therefore near miraculous. You trace the rim of the jar with a fingertip, feel its worn curve, and lay your hand on top, still, letting the warmth seep through your palm. Somewhere in the distance, the goat sighs. You imagine her curled up in the corner, chewing on scraps, chewing on memory. You wonder if she ever thinks about cheese. Probably not, but she knows where to find it. You sit like this for a long moment. Time stretches, elastic and slow. While the crumbs dissolve, the sun shifts, your breath steadies. Around you, the world continues its muted song of dust and stone and small survival. You listen and feel your body settle into the quiet acceptance of enough. Not comfort, not fullness, but enough. You brush crumb from your fingers, gather the jar, and set it on the table. The sunlight has warmed it nearly to body temperature. You stand, legs a little steadier. You glance through the shutters at the day outside. A shimmer of heat, a flicker of goat hoof, the hesitant arc of a cloud drifting across the sky. You breathe it in, noticing how the air changes when it touches your lungs. Your sandals feel different now, lighter in a strange way. You're still barefoot inside, but the world beyond these shutters seems accessible again, if only just slightly. You can feel the chair under your hand as you reach for it. You run your palm along its braided rope seat. Feel the tension in the fibers, the comfort waiting. You sit and watch shade lengthen across the room, warm tile cooling in spots yet still retaining memory of sun. There is no grand relief here, no feast, no banquet, just the hard, brittle cheese and the space it created in your belly and in your mind, enough to make the day possible. You could stand now. You could walk. You might even manage to return to the garden, to tend the onions and leaky leeks with hands that feel more solid, more allowed to trust themselves. You cup the jar to your cheek one last time, cold clay against warm skin, and feel the gentle tremor of living. Then, letting it go, you set it down and rise to move through the hush of your own breath. Tomorrow could bring none of this. Tomorrow could bring more hunger. But tomorrow is not here yet. So you step toward the doorway, sandals soft on cool clay, and feel the day waiting, patient, indifferent, full of the same demands as before. You pause at the threshold, 1 foot outside, 1 foot in, and you breathe the dust-flavored morning for what it is, another chance. A midday hush hangs over the courtyard as you step out. Your sandals pick up dust warmed by the sun, each grain pressing into the leather straps like a reminder that even the ground insists you remember how easily comfort can slip away. You move slowly, attuned to the texture of stone underfoot, the lingering echo of your own breath. From the corner of your eye, you catch a shift in the shadows, where the barrel-aged goat has settled again, that familiar shape at the edge of sound. You pause, letting your body settle into the rhythm of the yard. Here, in this stillness, you sense the imminence of something called feast, of indulgence, but only if you have dared enough to harvest it. You breathe in deep, the dry tang of wheat dust, the sharp note of cured onions drying in the sun, the faint sweetness of straw thatched into the beams. And beneath it all, that low, steady warmth tied to the idea that today might hold more than yesterday's crumbs. You trudge across the courtyard stones to the coop, its entrance small, cobweb-wrapped, and patched with bits of cloth pressed into gaps like mismatched memory. The wood glows faintly around the edges, bearing fingerprints of years. Each pressed so many times the curve of the door seems familiar to something in your own bones. You reach out and touch the latch, finger brushing the red clay smudge someone left there. Perhaps you, half asleep and half hoping it would secure the door to the promise it holds. You lift it, and the door creaks, a slow sigh of effort. Inside, the coop is dim, but alive, full of rustling and soft clucks. A small flock of hens clusters near the back, where the light fades into shadows that feel as thick as wool. You step in, earth shifting beneath your feet. The air is warm, close, and layered. Stale straw and broken eggshell mingling with chicken breath in the faint morning light. The hens scatter at your approach, wings brushing your calves in feather-soft currents. You hold still, letting their bodies brush past, feeling the soft rumble of wings, the flutter of feathers like fragile silk. One hen, a mottled brown one, pauses near your foot, pecking at a scrap of straw. You consider her, nameless, her head cocked as though weighing whether you belong in the space that is hers. You breathe again, tasting rot and straw and living warmth, sensing that everything here has a story. Dust from yesterday's feed, the ghost of last night's predator scare, the hope of egg-laying season. You shift your weight, aware of the slight ache in your ankles from kneeling yesterday to grind grain, and you gather courage. There's an unspoken ledger keeping time. Grain for feed, scraps for shells, and somewhere in its margins, hidden, there is lunch. You close your eyes, feeling the hum of feathers flicker around your legs. You inhale the scent of chicken warmth and feather oil, delicious and unsettling, like bathing in regret. You exhale through your nose, making a quiet whoosh of breath as you steady yourself. The coop pauses with you. No movement, no cluck, no scurry. All stillness pooled, waiting. You reach down and gently grasp the hen by the body, not squeezing, just holding. You feel the soft give beneath your fingers, the warmth, the heartbeat fluttering against your palm. The feathers lift and settle between your fingers, as though yielding to your touch. You sense the panic in her pulse, though your hands are meant to soothe. You hold her to your chest, feeling the slight rise and fall of her body, the concentrated warmth of blood and breath. In that moment, you feel connected, not predator to prey, but creature to creature, an intimate pulse shared between skin and feather. Time dissolves. The coop grows smaller, the dust deeper, and your senses focus. The muffled beat of her heart, the feathery stubble along her neck, the tremble in her legs. You feel guilty, powerful, sad, and alive, all in the same quivering breath. You hold her closer, then gently release, stepping back to let this close intimacy go, because you have work to do. The hen cackles once, sharp and brittle, and scuttles away into the pile of straw that sighs under her reclaim. You squat and brush crumb dust from her feathers, as though setting her free from your hands. You trace a fingertip along the curve of her breast, then leave her to the coop's gloom. You rise, steadying your breath, and spot the arrow of light pointing toward the coop's front, where a solitary egg glimmers pale against a nest of hay. You approach, aware that everything carries meaning. That egg is not a guarantee, but a gift, a small ship of hope in a sea of want. You lift it gently, the shell cool and firm. You bring it out into the light, the smooth, delicate surface etched by straw fragments and faint dust. You cup it in your palm, feeling the slight warmth of your own skin absorb into its surface. It is fragile and more valuable than any coin or grain sack today. You stand outside the coop now, egg in hand. Breathing in the courtyard smells anew. There is yeast from yesterday's brew, hay from the stable flats, distant smoke from the hearth prepared for lunch. You close your eyes for a moment and let the world bloom behind your eyelids. The hen's pecks, the dust motes drifting in beams of sunlight. Your heartbeat steady like a drum of survival, or perhaps celebration. You are holding possibility. You could eat it now. Soft scramble, sunny side up across that stone board where you broke curds yesterday. You could trust it to fill the hollow in your chest. But you weigh your options. Bread, broth from last week's bones, onion, and egg. You cringe at the reminder of onions, their acid bite lingering even in memory. But this egg is fresh, unbroken, something to build upon. You step over the threshold to the main room, egg cupped tight. The goat looks up, ears flicking. She senses the shift, the cargo you carry. You press the egg into a rag in your apron, warmth turning the fabric faintly damp. You move past the stool by the hearth, where yesterday's curds sit colder now, with a ring of hardened ash around the rim of the clay jar. You set your load beside it, as if introducing them. Egg to curd. Your breath slows. You feel the weight of the egg shift in your palm, and the egg hums with promise. It's not enough. A single egg. But it is. It reminds you that even small indulgence can manifest as a moment of quiet grace, the fragile taste of being enough. You kneel near the hearth, ash shifting under your knees. You cup the egg again, hold it close to your chest, as though you could sense its heartbeat. And in that gesture, you taste more than food. You taste possibility, tenderness, the soft promise of a day that might contain more than survival. The goat nudges your foot again, impatient or entitled. It doesn't matter which. You ignore her, focusing. You run your fingertips along the browning lip of the clay jar. You cup the egg, then set it down beside the curds. Stone heat radiates upward, warming your knees. The smell of ash and sweat, sweat and dust, dust and onion, layered, interwoven. You close your eyes and inhale that tapestry of life lived. Your hands hover over the hearth. You could crack the egg now. You could smear it into curds. You could sit and hold this moment while the world shifts around you. The stone cools where your hands rest, but the air warms. Sun through open window. You listen to your breath pool in your chest. The goat's sighing returns, echoing low in the space. You open your eyes to the jar and the egg, fragile disc and fragile container. You inhale, tasting winter chill and spring sun, holding the possibility of nourishment in your lungs. You could eat it now, but hold yet a moment. Let the day unfold unhurried. The egg is yours, earned by care, by risk, by quiet rituals no one records. You rise quietly, leaving those two small treasures at your place by the hearth, the hen settling back into her coop in the dim. You step outside, the courtyard glare turning stone to sandpaper, and you close the door softly. There is no clang of completeness, no feast, only the hush of possibility. You feel the ache in your legs soften. The sun has edged higher, fingers brushing the reed-thatched roof, and you sense the slow turn of time toward lunch, whatever that might bring. But here's this. One egg, one humble moment of luxury earned the way the world was always learned in dust and thin stone. And it is enough to tether you to now, to this place of deliberate stillness, hunger balanced by care. You cross the courtyard again, sandals whispering over warmed stone, and you breathe out, soft and unhurried, as the goat's impatient bleat dissolves into the afternoon heat. The morning breathes through the cracks in the clay brick walls, thick with yesterday's smoke, and the sigh of something simmering, still on the edge of heat. The scent is not unfamiliar. It has not been unfamiliar for as long as you've been alive. It is the scent of pottage, again, and it hovers in the air like a memory you didn't ask for. Thin steam, flavored faintly with onion skin, pulses from the pot like an old complaint. You shift beneath your woven reed mat, Scratch at a bite, and try not to count how many days in a row you've eaten the same thing. Because it isn't about days, is it? It's just the rhythm of your life now. Breakfast, if it's warm, is pottage. If it's not warm, it's still pottage, only harder to chew and even harder to forgive. There's always a trace of grit in it too. Sand, maybe, or bits of ground chaff that escaped someone's lazy hand. You chew carefully. Your back tooth is still sore from last time. Someone's elbow bumps yours. You don't know whose. The room is too dim, and the sleeping arrangement's too communal. A cousin, maybe. A sibling. A child that doesn't technically belong to anyone, but always seems to be in the way. Their hair smells like goats and dust, and they roll over with the sound of dry fabric scraping dry skin. No one says anything. No one ever does. Words are too expensive in the morning. You sit up slowly, your joints making that quiet pop you've learned to ignore. The floor is as unforgiving as it was yesterday. Packed earth with uneven bumps where someone once spilled a bowl and no one cared enough to smooth it out. You shuffle toward the fire pit, or what passes for one. A shallow scoop of ash, crusted with the memory of heat, ringed by stones that do little but get in your way. Someone has kept it alive. Barely. You suspect it was not out of love, but out of spite. No one wants to start it from nothing again. The pot sits where it always sits, blackened from smoke and lined with crusts of meals long past. It clings to the stones like an exhausted relative, and from within it comes the quiet, soggy sound of bubbling. That low, miserable blurp that tells you it's edible, but only just. You tilt the lid with your thumb and let the sour steam rise into your face. There's a limp green of something that once hoped to be a vegetable, floating next to a barley grain that looks older than your youngest cousin. You stare at it a moment, then reach for the ladle. You eat without ceremony. There is no such thing as breakfast here, just the act of putting warm mush into your mouth before the chores begin. The texture is consistent, which is not the same as pleasant. It is the kind of consistency that numbs your tongue, not because it's spicy or shocking, but because your brain has simply given up sending updates about it. Chew, swallow, repeat. Somewhere behind you, someone coughs, and it sounds wet. Another slurp, another mouthful, another bite of something that could be lentil or could be regret. The bowl you use is older than you, its cracks filled in with pitch and hope. You hold it in one hand, while the other picks a stray pebble from your teeth. The pottage never changes. Sometimes there's leek, sometimes garlic, sometimes both, if someone got lucky at the market or bartered well. But mostly, it's the same. A mash of barley and emmer, water thickened by time, and the faint promise of sustenance. You dream of salt sometimes. Just salt. Something sharp enough to remind your tongue it's alive. The pottage simmers on, thickening more by determination than design. No one stirs it anymore. The fire beneath it is barely alive, but that's fine. It's not meant to cook so much as linger, like a bad decision, like gossip, like the smell of old goat hair. You sit with your legs tucked beneath you, knees aching from the day, the hem of your tunic stiff with dried splash and ash, and the crusted edge of a day's survival. Your back leans against a post that feels more animal than tree, oily from the touch of generations who leaned just like you. Tired, not heroic. Just tired. A scraping sound echoes faintly near your left. Someone else scoops another bowl. Maybe it's your sister. Maybe the neighbor. Maybe just a shape with a hand. Someone who never speaks, never leaves, and always eats more than their share. You don't look. You don't want to know. The ladle clinks like a bell tolling for taste, for salt, for herbs, for anything. And the pottage responds with a wet, passive slop. It has no opinion about being eaten. It simply exists, like fog or defeat. You remember once, maybe last winter or the winter before, You can't tell anymore as the seasons blur into stages of dampness. Someone had managed to drop in a strip of dried fish. The room had erupted in such excitement you could almost hear people chewing with joy, or at least slightly less despair. Today, there is no fish, just roots and bitterness, and the faint suspicion that one of the onions was not entirely an onion. Outside, a rooster crows for no reason. It is not morning, nor evening, nor any holy hour. It simply declares its opinion to the dust. The sound enters the long house like an unwelcome draft, twisting around ankles and between fingers, making the fire feel even less like warmth and more like a memory of it. You shift on the hard-packed earth. You are one vertebra closer to becoming it. Someone sneezes. Another coughs. The fire spits once in defiance. Your bowl rests in your lap like a dull weight, half-eaten, entirely regretted. And still, you eat more, because this is dinner, and also tomorrow's breakfast, and maybe lunch if you're lucky, or slow. The day of pottage is not a day at all. It is a lifetime. It is continuity in edible form, binding 1 hour to the next, a paste of sameness smeared across the timeline of your hunger. The ceiling above you is a constellation of soot and shadows. Somewhere, a beetle scuttles. Somewhere else, something drips without explanation. It always has. You gave up asking years ago. The walls themselves carry the scent of wet straw and smoke and long-decayed ambition. Your feet, tucked against your body, radiate a cold that no socks can undo. Not that you have any. The goats have settled. You can hear their low, judgmental breathing. One sighs, another shifts. You know that tomorrow they will stare at you as you ladle out the pottage again, their eyes heavy with the knowledge that they would never eat such things. But you will, because the day of pottage never ends. It was breakfast. It is supper. It will be part of tomorrow if you let it survive the night. And it will. Mold avoids it out of respect. Rats ignore it out of taste. Only humans, in their need to keep existing, turn it into ritual. You scrape the bottom of the bowl with a motion that is more reflex than desire. A final mouthful. A thick, gritty swallow. You do not chew so much as tolerate. The texture lingers like an argument you chose not to finish. Your belly is not full, but it is no longer empty. This is victory, by the standards of pottage. The room begins to dim. Or perhaps your eyes are simply tired. Either way, outlines blur. The fire softens. The goat breath thickens. Your hands are sticky, and the cloth meant for wiping has vanished, possibly now being used as a pillow by someone with fewer scruples. You place the bowl aside, near the others, all with similar streaks of survival crusted around their rims. A still life of hunger paused, but not solved. There is a snore, deep and rattling. There is a cough that sounds like it might bring down the rafters. The roof does not leak, but only because it has frozen shut. You shift again, seeking a spot of earth that is not already claimed by someone else's elbow or backside. You find one. You take it. You exist there, breathing the same air that has been breathed all day. Thick, warm, tired air, filled with things unsaid and unwashed. You pull a blanket, if you can call it that, over your knees. It smells like the pottage, which is fitting. You curl toward the fire, letting it lick the edges of your fatigue with orange light. In the darkness, your stomach gurgles again. Not in protest, not in hunger, just as punctuation. You do not respond. You are too tired to argue with your own insides. In the shadows, a child murmurs in sleep. A parent shifts. A goat huffs once. The day folds itself inward. And somewhere, in the blackened pot, the pottage rests, waiting for morning, when it will be stirred again. Not because it wants to be, but because there is nothing else. You stretch your fingers just so, patting the woven mat to find your place at the table, though there is no table in the way you might expect. Instead, planks of rough-hewn wood lie across barrels, leaning precariously, while your companions settle around you. the planks creaking under collective weight. The morning light filters through thatch, muted and smoky, guiding your hand to the bowl before you. The bowl is not yours, but you know its shape, its rough spiral of wood, the faint scent of yesterday's barley still clinging to the rim. A sour tang of fermented grains lingers there, and your fingers twitch, remembering that forks are distant dreams and spoons are rarities for the few. Your hand descends, brushing against someone else's before you, and you pause, the warmth of another's touch still vibrating through the plank, before you scoot closer, elbow-knocking shoes made of goat hide. Each breath carries the mingled odors of pottage and sweat, the sharp metal tang of leather and wood warmed by bodies crowded close. The bowl holds yesterday's stew, thick with bits of root, onion peels left in, yet there is pride in scraping it clean, in pressing your fingers past the ring of old broth to the precious spoonfuls hiding beneath. You dip in, the liquid clinging to your skin, cool at first but warming quickly as your flesh absorbs its weight. A drop falls back, and you flick it, your thumb brushing the grain. You chew slowly, deliberately, tasting the grit of the root fibers and the faint sweetness of marrow fat, an accidental luxury. You swallow, and the back of your throat remembers hunger before the pottage, even before the bowl. You breathe out, and the noise of rasping breaths fills the silent spaces between bites. You echo your neighbor's motions, almost unconsciously, as though this is a shared dance, each hand moving in rhythm to silent music. Someone across from you shifts, sending a tremor through the table. Your wrist brushes against a scraped elbow, and you feel a micro shiver of connection, as if the heat of community is drawn not from the fire, but from the way your bones vibrate against theirs. A crumb falls by your foot, and you glance downward to reclaim it before a rat does, its whiskers twitching in the darkness, quick with hope. You hesitate, the crumb so small. Perhaps someone else saw it too, but you pocket it instead, ashamed and proud all at once. There is no etiquette here, except necessity. You lick the back of your hand when you think no one's watching, tasting all the flavors of the shared dinner: salt, earth, sweat, vinegary residue. You dip back in, eyes lowered, coaxing the last strands from the bowl. Pipit roots, marrow bits, flecks of greens. You're careful not to flare your nostrils in a way that shows your desperation, but your chest tightens with longing for more. More broth, more warmth, more something intangible. The plank beneath you groans again. A child's foot, small and bare, dabs the plank in a search for stolen crumbs. You look, but do not scold. They are younger, and their hunger is raw. You hand them a piece, just one, more out of habit than generosity. Your hand lingers on theirs, and you feel the weight of lineage, of centuries of hands reaching toward shared bowls. A dry chuckle echoes behind the boards, a goat somewhere outside, perhaps, or maybe your grumpy sibling coiling laughter into the thatch. Your senses weave together, the heat of bodies pressed near the fire's fringe, the rough edge of the plank against your palm, the metallic smell of sweat and wood smoke, the soft scrape and gulp of communal eating. The bowl empties. You scrape it clean, fingers now sticky and warm, the last of the pottage claiming its place in memory. You press it to your brow, wiping the salt, yours and the pottage's. You breathe in deeply and set the bowl down, your fingertips damp against the wood. You lean back slightly, chest heavy with sustenance that is less about fullness and more about continuation. A moment of quiet washes over you, a lull as the others pause too, each lost in the shared hush that follows a half-finished meal. The wooden plank rattles softly as someone shifts, and you exhale without thinking, releasing yourself from the tension of hunger and proximity. You tuck your hands into your lap, finding the heat still pulsing between your fingers and the wood. It is enough. Enough to hold you until the next time. Silence settles again, woven thick across your skin, whispered into your bones. And somewhere near the wall, the rat scuttles, reminding you that the world continues beyond this meal, beyond this room. The plank creaks, the fire crackles. The hunger is not forgotten, but for now, it is tempered. A breath, the rattle of distant footsteps, gentle against the quiet hull of the morning, and you rise slowly, drifting toward the next task, just as the bowl recedes from your memory, leaving behind only warmth and the echo of hands learning to share. You rise from the plank when the last of the bowl's warmth fades, your muscles pulling against the plank's curve as though waking from a deep, shared sleep. Even the movement is communal. Your neighbors shift too, catching the plank's soft complaint under the weight. The air is thick with day's promise, smoke drifting upward, breath drifting outward, hunger drifting past you, tethered for a moment. Your fingers open and close, still sticky from broth, and you press them lightly at your temples, pressing the warmth into your skull. A moment like inhaling an old lullaby, quiet, familiar, almost too gentle to stand against the hush. Your hand drifts downward, brushing the plank's scarred surface, as if touching the history written in its grain. In the wood's lines, you feel the echoes of meals past, crumbs that fell, jostles that made spirits rise, tongues that pressed dust from its fibers. You smooth a splinter with your nail, and the pain is soft, nearly imperceptible, but it roots you, here, now, part of the shared rhythm. A damp spark of dust floats in the light above the fire pit, a speck of yesterday drifting toward tomorrow. You blink, nearly catching it, and let it go, because even small things must travel on. You step backward, the plank swaying in reply. Your legs carry the memory of stiff flourishes, the twinge at your thigh from kneading dough, the ache at your calf from tending sheep. You pause, hand on hip, inhaling that blend of smoke and sweat and wood and broth that maps this place behind your ribs. Breathe it in. Let it settle like ash in your lungs. When you release it, you think you feel the weight of the hearth shift, as though it too is exhaling. A sigh shared between wood and woman. Your palm drifts to your cheek, remembering the damp imprint of broth from the bowl, now gone. The skin there is raw from morning chills, but warmed by the exchange of heat around you. You press your hand firmly, feeling the pulse beneath the skin, a slow, languid beat that says, "You are alive, still on this plank that creaks under others who breathe like you." You let go only when the fire's glow seems to thrum gently against your wrist, reassuring you that the warmth you sought with your eyes is still wrapped around your center. You step forward again, toward the center of the table, where jars of pickles stand like silent sentinels, glassless, their rims threaded with cloth, brine glistening through the hemp. You dip a finger, tasting the sour snap of pickled onion rind, tangy enough to make your cheeks prickle. You swallow, your throat cracking softly. The flavor is sharper than the broth, an edge that whispers of field and season, and the slow churn of time passing under stone lids. You swirl your finger in the brine, coating the taste across your tongue, and hum the note of survival lodged in that jar. You mind the vows you made to taste them only once. You taste again. Behind you, the plank quivers as another hand reaches for the same jar, fingers nearly brushing. You pause, breath held, as though the world itself draws a deep breath and waits. There is an unspoken agreement, a moment of stillness, and then the gloved fingers next to yours lift a portion of rind. You share a nod without looking. The mood shifts from hunger to communion. You both taste the jar's ghost and release the moment back into the thatch. You tuck the damp fingertip into the sleeve of your linen tunic, savoring the salt as it settles between the folds. Your mind drifts again to the river outside, humming its own ceremony, to the goat chewing calmly near the entrance, as if chewing over slow truths. You imagine the goat's jaws working, over and over, steady as time. The goat knows no forks. The goat knows no need to wait. The goat just lives, chewing, resting, sharing warmth. You feel a smile crack, dry and small, at the corner of your mouth. Your hand drifts further, toward the fire pots that still hiss softly. They contain tea, water thick with herbs, flash steamed by the embers. You lean closer, inhaling the scent. Mint and wild fennel, and something bright you cannot name. Maybe a glimpse of morning, maybe a dream of meadow. You dip a spoon with your thumb, scooping up a drop. It's scalding, but you press the drop to your lips anyway, letting it burst there, carrying heat deeper than the bowl could. You feel it slide down your throat, and for a moment the plank underfoot feels like a dance floor, your body buoyed by the warmth that spreads. At the edge of the circle, someone rises to scrape the bowls. Again. The rasp of spoon along wood is sticky sweet to your ears, another lullaby built of repetition. You watch the motion, slow and precise. The scraper collects the residue, and your stomach churns. But you close your lips against the ache, as if sealing a pact. You will return tonight, and the bowl will be empty, and the dance will continue. You nod to the motion, feeling the body part of a cycle older than any of you can name. You stand fully now, your breath steadying in your chest. The plank frames you, a stage, a cradle, a threshold. The meal is over, finished, but alive in echoes. Warmth behind your ribs, stickiness on your fingertips, the low hum of bodies waiting for the next thing to happen. You take a step away, and as the plank tilts beneath your foot, someone else shifts in reply. You feel the thread of connection, every movement registered, every breath remembered. You drift toward the hearth, passing near a sibling whose shoulder brushes yours briefly. You smell familiar soap and unwashed hair and the sting of affection without words. They glance away, pulling their tunic tighter, just slightly. You breathe out, noticing the tension around their neck, and breathe in again, sharing the offset rhythm of siblinghood. A low grunt, familiar as a heartbeat, echoes somewhere from outside, maybe from the neighbor's goat, maybe from your own tethered goat, marking the boundary between inside and the world beyond. At the fire, you lean over the coals, warming your palms and torso. The plank behind you creaks less now, giving over to the mice nesting in the corner, the rat that skitters always at dusk. You feel their tiny hearts hammering in parallel to yours. You soften, rising on the balls of your feet, absorbing the rhythm until your bones hum in time. You fold your hands before you, study the heat's dance through your fingers. It's enough. Just heat, source, and effect, like a secret shared between you and the flame. No words needed. Your body speaks it. You let it fill you. You shift again, the firelight flickering across your sleeve, your cheek, your palm. Your stomach burbles, a soft reminder that the world will take more soon. You lean in, breathe, and step away, toward the door where the goat waits, tethered and patient. Its breath puffs in the cold air. You reach out behind you to rub its side, skin against coarse hair, both warming and rough in the same motion. You hang your hand there, letting the heat travel from your palm into the animal, and feel the loop close. Food for body, body for fire, fire for warmth, and the world waits again for the next bowl. You pull your cloak tighter as you step outside into morning's chill. Wood smoke, earth, pottage memory, all settling quietly behind you. In the distance, someone begins the toil of the day. Footsteps, scraping tools, the low hum of grinding oats. You inhale that sound and step forward, the meal finished not just in body but in spirit, carried with you as warmth within bone and blood and breath. And as the plank circle fades behind you, the memory of hands and bowls lingers like a lullaby, humming in the hush of dawn, echoing softly in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The bowl arrives with no ceremony. It simply appears, gripped in the crusty fingers of someone you probably share blood with, though you wouldn't swear to it. It is clay, chipped in 3 places, with a faint smell of smoke and something faintly sour clinging to its rim. There is a pause, a silent agreement among the few gathered that this, here, is food. And then hands move, not 1 or 2, but a flurry of them, like a startled flock of birds descending on a single patch of grain. They do not hesitate. Neither do you. You reach in not because you want to, but because if you don't, your portion, such as it is, will dissolve into someone else's grasp. The texture is something between porridge and mud, but warmer than either. It clings to your fingers, stubborn and unwilling. There is no spoon. There was once a spoon, but it was traded, broken, or possibly eaten in a fit of extreme optimism. So you make do. Everyone makes do. Elbows nudge. A cousin's arm knocks your wrist, and some of the stew, if you could call it that, slides off your fingers and back into the bowl with a quiet, wet slap. You try again, this time faster, and get a lump of something vaguely vegetable. You don't look at it too closely. If you examine your food, you're more likely to identify it. And if you identify it, you might not eat it. And if you don't eat it, well, someone else will, with their whole hand, and possibly a sneeze. The warmth of the bowl is oddly comforting, like pressing your cheek against the side of a sleeping goat. Not pleasant, but steady, familiar. The smell is layered. There's something vaguely like lentils, or maybe just old dishwater, a hint of ash, a whisper of something sour, like turnip that's seen too many summers. There's no meat, don't be ridiculous. But once, someone said they found a bone. No one has confirmed this. You hear someone sniff behind you, not because of emotion, but because their nose is permanently running, the way noses do in homes where cold and smoke compete for dominance. The air is thick, the fire is low, and someone just licked their fingers and went back in. You pretend you didn't see. Eating like this is less about nourishment and more about coordination. It's a performance, a contest, a desperate ballet of fingers and reach. You've learned to be quick. You've learned to angle your hand just so, to avoid knuckles and nails and the slap of someone else's palm. There are no rules, only rhythm. You wait for the moment between swipes, between slurps, between grunts of satisfaction, and you take your chance. There is something intimate about it, in a way that makes you both grateful and mildly horrified. The shared silence, the way you all pretend you don't hear the loud chewing, the cousin who smacks their lips like a dying fish, the little one who tries to steal with both hands and gets thwacked for their enthusiasm, the old one who no longer has teeth but gums the food with alarming commitment. And you learn to chew without thinking, to swallow without asking, to focus not on the flavor, but on the warmth, because the warmth means the fire is still going, and the fire means there's still something left, and something left is better than nothing at all. You've stopped trying to wipe your fingers. The rag is stiff and smells like onions. You lick them instead, like everyone else does. The taste is a little earthy, a little smoky, a little mysterious, like licking the inside of an old boot that's recently hosted a turnip. But at least it's yours. When the bowl is finally empty, not clean, never clean, but empty, there is a brief moment of quiet, a pause, the kind that comes after a storm. Everyone stares at the vessel like it might refill itself, if only you waited long enough. It does not. Of course it does not. But the staring continues anyway. The oldest among you reaches for the bowl and tips it forward. A last smear runs down the side, glistening in the firelight. One finger, wrinkled and bent like old wood, wipes it up and brings it to a waiting mouth. A sigh follows. Not joy, exactly. Just endurance. Someone coughs, someone burps, Someone mutters that the next batch better not taste like last week's, even though everyone knows it absolutely will. You shift your weight and feel the ache in your knees, the dull heaviness of a stomach that is not quite full, but no longer gnawing. That, in this house, is a victory. You rise slowly, careful not to knock over the bowl. That happened once. No one has forgiven the offender. You move toward the pile of straw that pretends to be a bed and wipe your hand on your tunic. It leaves a streak. Everything leaves a streak. You're used to it. Behind you, someone is still licking their palm. Another is sniffing again. A rat scrabbles beneath the floor, sounding, somehow, hopeful. You wonder if it gets scraps. You wonder if it eats better than you do. It might. The fire crackles once, a single sharp sound, then settles again. The smoke curls in the low air like an old thought, thick and slow and unwelcome. You lie down beside the others, their breath warm, their presence heavier than blankets. The smell of shared food clings to everything: hair, skin, fabric, breath. You don't mind. It's the smell of survival. And as you close your eyes, with fingers that still remember the shape of the bowl, you wonder what tomorrow will bring. Another bowl, another meal, another contest of hands and hunger. But that's tomorrow. For now, you lie still. And somewhere across the village, a bell rings faintly, calling someone to something. Not you. Not tonight. You listen to the quiet settling of the longhouse, to the rustle of limbs and the creak of beams and the sigh of your own breath disappearing into the dark. The bowl is empty, and so are you, but only just. And somewhere nearby, a goat shifts in the straw and pretends not to judge you. Softly, quietly, the night swallows the rest. The morning doesn't taste like much. That's your first clue. No earthy bread crust to chew through. No hint of stale barley or weak pottage bubbling over the fire. The air smells like ash and obligation, heavy, dry, and whispering that today is not about fullness. It's about faith. And faith is cold, bland, and shaped suspiciously like a spiritual excuse for hunger. You sit by the hearth, if only out of habit. There's no fire worth mentioning, just the phantom warmth of yesterday's coals, buried deep beneath a dusting of ash you dare not disturb. Firewood is scarce and saved for real meals, not mornings like this. Your stomach whines quietly, but everyone is pretending it doesn't. No one looks at each other. Not really. There's an unspoken rule on fasting days. Silence digests easier than envy. You're not even sure what day it is. But the church knows. The church always knows. Feast days. Fast days. Saints you've never heard of whose dietary preferences now somehow apply to you. There's a calendar nailed up in the chapel made of parchment and gilt, each square marked with what you may or may not chew, what time you're allowed to stop pretending you're fine, and what counts as meat, sort of, if you squint. You drag a cracked mug of water toward your lips, pretending it's a treat. It's not. It's lukewarm and tastes like damp straw and tin. You've seen cleaner puddles, but even those might be off limits if the priest has declared it a penitential week. Because the Lord works in mysterious ways, and one of them involves you contemplating salvation through mild dehydration. Your neighbor's chicken scratches near the threshold, looking plump and unrepentant. It does not observe the holy fast. It clucks with the self-satisfaction of something who knows it's exempt, for now. You eye it too long, and your mother elbows you in the ribs with a moral reminder. That bird isn't food today. It's temptation with feathers. The sun climbs slowly, like it too has been told to fast. Pale and stingy with warmth, it slips through the high clay window with the enthusiasm of a reluctant blessing. You shift to catch it on your face, just for the illusion of comfort. The wall behind you is rough and cool, the kind of cool that reminds you you're sitting still too long and haven't earned your heat today. There's a low rustle of movement around the house. Not chores. Not yet. Just the awkward choreography of people pretending not to be hungry in the same room. Someone coughs. Someone else shifts their weight. There's a creak of an old floor reed that's always one snap away from snapping. You stare at a smear on the wall. It could be old porridge. Or a blessing. It's hard to tell anymore. Then the priest's bell sounds from the chapel down the hill, faint and merciless. One long ring. Fasting confirmed. As if your empty table hadn't already delivered the news. You rise, bones popping like poorly oiled hinges. It's going to be one of those days. No meat, no butter, no anything that feels like it might soften the edges of living. You've memorized the rules, even if they change every week. You're allowed thin pottage, if it's made without fat, bread, if it's made without comfort, and water, but not too much. Thirst, after all, is purifying. The idea is that the soul should rise when the stomach sinks. But your stomach is louder than your soul and far less patient. You trudge outside, squinting against the glare of dust and piety. The courtyard smells like damp stone and other people's sacrifice. Your sibling is already hauling water from the well, muttering about the hypocrisy of monks who brew beer during Lent. You nod, but say nothing. Openly questioning church logic is a luxury for those not already scraping the edges of penance. By midday, the ache in your belly has transformed from sharp complaint to a kind of resigned fog. It dulls everything, your thoughts, your limbs, your sense of time. You've entered the second stage of hunger, the floaty kind, where you're not sure if you're lightheaded from holiness or simply underfed. It doesn't matter. Either way, you're slow now. Not in a graceful spiritual way. More like laundry left out too long, stiff and sour and quietly sagging. Your neighbor walks past carrying a basket that smells like dried fish and disappointment. She gives you a knowing glance, the universal look of a peasant mid-fast. Equal parts judgment and pity. You nod back, but your eyes are locked on the basket. A glint of silver skin, a hint of something smoked. You imagine chewing it. You imagine the texture more than the taste, because you've forgotten what taste is like when it's not made of boiled roots. Later, you gather with the others for the communal meal, if you can call it that. A cauldron of lentil water sits simmering over a sad fire. It smells faintly of onion skin and too much prayer. The ladle clinks against the pot with a sound that feels more like mockery than invitation. Everyone takes a portion. You cradle your bowl like it's fragile, because it is. Cracked clay mended with twine, slick with old oil that never really washes out. You dip your fingers in. It's hot enough to scald, but not enough to soothe. Just enough to remind you that even food during a fast is a trial. There's silence as you eat. Not reverent silence. Not grateful silence. Just the kind born from collective endurance. No one wants to talk, because talking takes energy, and energy implies hope. You suck the lentil broth from your fingers like it's a blessing, though it tastes more like boiled dust and obligation. A soggy lump of barley slides into your mouth with the texture of regret, chewy, bland, determined to linger in your molars, like a reminder that joy was never invited to this table. Across from you, someone coughs wetly into their elbow, and the splash of broth on your sleeve is almost welcome. It's warm, at least. The fire has gone out twice already. No one wants to get up to feed it. The ashes barely glow, like they're fasting too, refusing even to burn properly. You stare into them as you scrape the last smear of lentil water from the side of your bowl with a crust that's so stale it nearly draws blood from your gums. Still, you chew it. You chew everything now. Even air feels like something you should be digesting. Someone mutters a psalm under their breath, and you can't tell if it's out of piety or spite. Either way, no one joins in. Everyone is waiting, not for a miracle, just for the next moment to pass, and then the next. Fasting isn't a dramatic act here. It's not heroic. It's just another rule that hurts and doesn't care if you're already hurting. You glance toward the doorway where your sibling once stashed a bit of dried apple last year, hidden under straw for a feast day. It's long gone, of course, probably discovered by a rat or a particularly determined child. But the memory of that tiny rebellion, that glimmer of sugar on the tongue, still sits in your bones like a ghost. And then, without ceremony, the meal is over. No one says anything. You simply hand your empty bowl to the person nearest, who stacks it with a grunt and shuffles away. The silence lingers like smoke, not thick but stubborn. You stand slowly. Your joints protest. Your belly does not. The rest of the evening limps along, thin and gray like the stew you're not allowed to have. No one expects entertainment. There are no diversions when every breath is spent not chewing. You fidget with a fraying piece of twine, picking at it until your fingers smell like old fiber and desperation. Across the room, someone is snoring already, though you suspect it's a performance, the kind of forced sleep that's easier than remembering how empty you feel. You settle in beside the hearth and stare at the cold stones, as if by looking long enough you might trick them into warmth. But no miracle arrives. The coals are as obedient to the season as you are to the church. The wind creeps under the door and makes a game of your ankles, nudging at them like a judgment. You pull your knees to your chest. It doesn't help. Somewhere behind you, someone whispers a prayer with a full mouth. Not of food, but of quiet rage. You don't turn. You've whispered that same prayer yourself, in the dark, on nights when fasting turned from piety to punishment. There's a hollow ache in your ribs where comfort used to live. Or maybe it was never there. Maybe it was always borrowed. And still, there's tomorrow. And tomorrow you will fast again. Not because you chose it, not even because you believe it, but because hunger is safer than rebellion, and obedience is easier than firewood. You curl into yourself on the straw mat, the scratch of it familiar now. Your belly growls like a sermon. You breathe through it. Above you, the rafters creak like old monks shifting in their prayers. Outside, the wind gathers, and inside, sleep begins. Slow, stubborn, and half-starved. Somewhere in the distance, someone sighs over a fish that might have been. And soon, it will be market day. The morning begins not with hope, exactly, but with a lesser cousin. The faint flutter of possibility that something might, for once, be different. Your knees crack as you rise, the straw beneath you rustling like dried beetles, and your shoulder still remembers the stone you slept against. You pull on your stiff linen wrap, still damp from last night's fog, and step into the air thick with sunrise and livestock. It's market day, and for one long, delusional moment, you let yourself imagine honey. You've been told stories. The baker who once had dates, the old woman who once traded a sack of onions for a lump of salt shaped like a bird, spices from faraway lands, painted pots, dried figs wrapped in thread. These are not things you've touched. Not really. But today, the ache in your stomach dares to imagine the sweetness of something that wasn't scraped from the bottom of yesterday's pot. You gather what you have. It's not much. A few wilted leeks tied with reed twine, one gourd that survived the neighbor's goat, and a small ceramic jug you've refilled and resealed more times than it was ever intended. It smells vaguely of vinegar now, though you tell yourself it's just time aging the clay. You wrap it all in a bit of faded cloth, the color long lost to washing in river silt, and tie it like a prize you pretend someone else might actually want. The path to the market is a dry, cracked ribbon that winds past other hopeful fools with similar bundles, one balancing a hen that looks half dead, another dragging a child too young to help and too loud to ignore. You avoid their eyes. They avoid yours. There is no camaraderie here, only parallel desperation. Even your feet seem to grumble, sliding inside sandals that were made for someone with slightly less unfortunate toes. Dust rises with every step, clinging to your skin, finding your mouth, coating your tongue in the taste of stone and drought. The sun peers down with that familiar indifference, its heat already testing the limits of your patience and your linen. By the time the village comes into view, a clutter of crumbling mud walls and crooked awnings, your arms ache, and you've imagined the taste of honey so vividly that your mouth has betrayed you with saliva. The market is already humming. That is, if the low drone of barter, goat complaints, and unrepentant haggling qualifies as music. There are rows of baskets, some full of what could be called goods if one is generous. Shriveled onions, brittle greens, a dried fish with one eye sealed shut and the other judging you. You pass a man with bundles of herbs that smell sharp and unfamiliar, but he sneers at your offering before you can even speak. His nose lifts, a gesture that transcends language, and you walk on. You lay your bundle down on a fraying mat and sit behind it. This is the part where you wait, and wish, and prepare to be disappointed in increments. The ground beneath you is uneven, warm in some places, unreasonably cold in others. Your back curves like a fishing hook. Your stomach reminds you that dreams of honey are not calories. You try to look pleasant, approachable. You fail. Everyone does. People pass, some glance, most don't. A child lingers too long near your leeks before being yanked away by a mother with a voice that pierces through market noise like a bone whistle. Eventually, an old man offers you a clay bead in exchange for your gourd. The bead is chipped. You trade anyway. You need something in your hand that wasn't in it this morning. Progress, you tell yourself, comes in tiny, chipped increments. You wander a bit, once you've bartered enough to make your sack feel lighter and your heart feel, if not full, then at least less empty. You pass the spice table, the one that always smells better than it looks. There are colored powders heaped in small bowls, red like sunburn, yellow like aged teeth, and one so black it feels like it might curse you if you breathe too close. You pretend you're just admiring. You always do. The merchant never bothers to acknowledge you. His eyes only track those who carry silver, or at least the promise of it. There is music, faint and distant, not intentional, not skilled, just someone idly plucking at a stringed instrument that's more twine than tool. It makes you feel sad, though you couldn't explain why. Maybe because it reminds you that even with nothing, people still try to make something, even if it's just noise over the hunger. You see a pot, not a beautiful one. It's cracked, like everything else. But it has a lid that fits, rare enough to count as luxury. You offer your bead. The woman selling it considers this for longer than it deserves. Eventually, she nods. You carry it like a trophy. It will leak, but it's yours. You pass a stall with dried eels. One has been there for weeks. You know this because it hasn't moved, and neither has the smell. But today, someone takes the other half, the less desiccated side. You consider asking what they paid. You don't. You wouldn't like the answer. By mid-afternoon, the sun begins to take things personally. Your neck prickles with heat rash. The back of your knees stick uncomfortably whenever you sit. Your sweat dries before it reaches your ribs. Your lips begin to crack in a way that makes smiling a luxury and talking an ordeal. But still, you stay, waiting for one last trade, one last crumb of opportunity. Something edible, something sweet, something that might taste like not gruel. A woman walks past with a basket you dare not look into. It smells like roasted something, something that once had feathers and now has value beyond language. Your stomach contracts so sharply you nearly gasp. But she does not slow. You will not taste roast today. You return home with your pot, a new blister, and less optimism than you arrived with. You imagine the neighbor will ask how it went. She always does, and you always lie. You will say it was good, that people liked your leeks, that someone admired the jug, that your pot is a treasure, not a cracked afterthought. You will boil something in it later, something gray, something that used to be a turnip, or at least claimed to be. It will bubble thick and slow, like surrender, and you will eat it with your hands, and someone else's fingers, and someone else's cough, and you will pretend not to notice the fly that drowns halfway through. Because this is the cost of living, not the coins, not the trade, but the stretch between dream and disappointment, the idea that the market might offer you something sweeter than what you already had, and the knowledge that it usually doesn't. Tomorrow, the pot will leak, the jug will sour, the gourd will be forgotten. But for a moment, you held the weight of a cracked pot in your hand and called it hope. And in that moment, heavy, uneven, and barely enough, you understood why people come back, even when there's no honey, even when there are no figs, even when the next chapter is called Leftovers Are a Myth, and the night grows long once more. You begin just as the smoke from last night's embers still curls in the dim morning light, the hearth's warmth fading like a memory, and you realize that there is nothing left. No bowls half filled with yesterday's stew, no crusts of bread to make porridge, no scraps hiding beneath the table. In this house, leftovers are a myth you tell yourself to dull the ache. You move with the heavy limp of someone who's learned that hope is a burden. The floorboards groan under your barefoot, cold and smooth, and you pause to feel the slight shiver that travels from the soles of your feet to the long, drawn-out ache in your ribs. That ache is hunger, wrapped around your spine like a thin shawl, unyielding and familiar, worn through until it feels like skin. The remains of the fire, gray ash flattened into the grate, are all that linger. Their weight on your chest is like an accusation. Still, you stir. You kneel before the hearth, your hands lingering in the cold soot, fingertips grazing flakes of charcoal that cling to your skin like unwanted memories. The ritual has been practiced for months. You rake the ash into a pile, leaving just enough embers to coax awake, then blow gently until the tinder whispers back. You breathe in the smoky copper scent, and for a moment it feels like an apology. It isn't hope exactly, just a quiet acceptance. The fire will grow, but the bowls, empty. Your sibling shifts on the straw pallet beside you, murmuring as if sleep holds them in a tender cage. They stretch, half aware, and you press back into the soot, turning your face away to keep from seeing the hollowness under their eyes. The goat, tethered just beyond the doorway's threshold, rests its chin on the worn wood, as if waiting for you to summon something edible. You slow blink, recognizing the goat's expectation as easier to bear than your own. There is no leftover porridge, but there is water in the clay pitcher. It's cool against your lips and flat like regret. You let it gather at your tongue, counting the seconds before you swallow. The burn in your throat a reminder that even simple things have consequences. Then you stretch and rise, each movement a soft protest in your bones. Your morning task is clear. You must remake what was not meant to last. The household expects it, silent in their need. The neighbors' thin walls, papered by wind and straw, embrace your life with 1,000 tiny tremors, like an audience waiting for any misstep. Today, the misstep would be failing to wring nourishment from emptiness. You trudge across the yard, mud seeping between your toes and carrying with it the stench of last night's rain, the earth heavy and suspicious underfoot. You pause at the well's edge, shifting your weight so that the bucket doesn't slam against the stone and echo into the empty morning. You draw water slowly, hearing the hollow thunk each time the wooden pail strikes bottom. The water tastes of memory, damp leaves, stale stone, and you bring it home as though it could be a meal in itself. When you slide back into the longhouse, everyone is watching, though their eyes are gentle. They look hungry too, but less desperate. You know their fear is patience, while yours is hunger sharpened by responsibility. You step to the largest pot on the hearth, the one you keep for days when everything else fails. You pour in the water, stir the ash-smoky embers until they glow, and then kneel beside it, adding handful after handful of barley grits. The grains hiss and sigh, as if waking from sleep. You run your fingers through the grits, feeling them cold and hard. They resemble the gravel under the floor, rough, lifeless shapes that promise something only if you persist. You shift your weight, pressing the heel of your hand into your lower back. The barley begins to absorb the water, swelling into a thick paste that clings to the ladle. You lift it, watching the steam drift across your face, and feel the raw morning air press against your lungs. You taste a single spoonful, gray and grainy, with the texture of regret. It sticks between your teeth and reminds you that there is no seasoning, no broth, no scraps to sweeten the edge. It is enough to silence the hunger, not to soothe it. You swallow and close your eyes against the ache. Your sibling stirs again. The goat's ears flick in the doorway. You ladle more into the pot, each swirl of the spoon a small act of creation. It feels like sculpting smoke, trying to form something precious out of emptiness. You glance toward the doorway at the neighbor's cottage, where a thin wisp of smoke appears at the chimney top. Perhaps there is meat there, or scraps, or butter melted over bread. The thought pulses in your blood, bright and poisonous. But you stay here, stirring oatmeal for the family. The barley bubbles and sighs, filling the longhouse with a dull warmth. The straw mat begins to smell of grain, dust, and hope, a small triumph. You ladle into bowls, mismatched, cracked, and heavy. You set them before each person, the spoon clinking against the clay, a quiet promise. A dog, your dog, sidles forward. There is no shame in sharing. You scrape the bottom of the pot into a smaller bowl, pale soup-colored, with barley pearls drifting like tiny stones in muddy water. The dog licks at it, appreciative, eyes half closed, chewing with enjoyment that you cannot summon. You watch the dog, finger grazing the pot's edge, and for a moment envy its contentment. But you turn back to the fire, drop another flake of wood onto the embers, breathe out a rough exhale. You glance at the bowls. One is half full, one nearly gone, one just a spoon dug deep. The lack of leftovers is obvious. Still, there are crumbs of barley left in the pot, enough for another share, enough to quell, for now, the worst of the hunger. You finish by carrying the pot outside, rinsing it in the same well water, but letting the cloudy barley residue settle. This ritual reminds you that even absence is something you can wash. You leave the pot to dry in the sun, its bare curve a testament to necessity's endurance. As the morning stretches on, the fire fades into embers again. The straw mats absorb the rising warmth, and the longhouse hums with contented murmurs, the sort that whisper, "We are fed, for now." No one speaks, but each face brightens with the residue of a meal. Hunger is quieted, but not silenced. You know the ache will return. You step outside, feeling the cold press against your back, a metronome marking the passing time. The goat is grazing, the dog follows, and you inhale the crisp air, tasting barley and ash. In the distance, the neighbor's smoke has grown thicker. Lunch for them, not you. The difference is not bitterness, but acceptance. Hunger has its hierarchy. Today, you alive to feed more than yourself. Your hands linger at your sides. The ache in your chest is different now, softer, deeper. It's not hunger alone, but hope. Enough barley to carry you forward, but not enough to build dreams upon. You press one hand to your belly, feeling the hollow slowly filling, and the other to the morning air, feeling the promise of midday's tasks. You glance back at the longhouse, the walls pulsing with breath and smoke. Hunger lingers there too, tucked into the edges of blankets, waiting. But for this moment, it is quiet. You stand in the yard, aware of the world around you. The goat's slow chew, the rough breath of the dog, the memory of barley on your tongue. the ghost crumbs of an empty pot. And as the morning light brightens, you pull the thread of routine around you, weaving absence into presence, turning scarcity into sustenance. Leftovers may be a myth, but necessity is a stubborn truth. Now you turn toward the fields, soft boots pressing through frost-hardened mud, heart heavy but steady, carrying the weight of another meal earned, another myth exploded, and another hunger held at bay. Until the next time you must cook again, stir again, hope again. You begin just as the memory of the last meal's barley still clings to the back of your throat, a persistent echo of scarcity. And somehow, though nothing has been spoken, the air feels different. There is a tremor in the hearth, an ember rekindled, a promise stirring in the smoke. You know in your bones that today, for once, will not begin with empty bowls. You step closer, boots pressing into the cold-packed floor, the weight of that unknown stirring a strange combination of excitement and caution. The fire glows with a slightly richer orange, as if someone slipped a secret coin into its coals. The sibling beside you opens their eyes, the primal question of hunger replaced by an almost disbelieving hope. Even the goat, tethered at the doorway, lifts its chin in curiosity, its bleat swallowed by the sudden hush. You lift your hand and let it hover above the hearth, feeling the warmth brush your palm, unlike recent mornings when even the air felt colder than steel. There is a sharp scent drifting in. Smoke, yes, but something deeper. Iron-born, blood-warm, exquisite and terrifying. It is the scent of meat, real meat, cooking. You pull your boots tighter around your ankles, as if that will steady you against the tremor in your ribs. Hunger suddenly tastes like memory. You remember what flesh feels like between your teeth. Days, no weeks, since the last time. That memory is both a balm and a torment, like recalling your mother's lullaby when she is long gone. Comforting, but impossible to hold. You kneel by the hearth, laying a gentle hand on the handle of the pot that bubbles softly. Steam coils up and brushes your face in ribbons of warmth. It carries the promise of something rich and strange. Inside, beneath the slow simmer, floats chunks of something dark, irregular, fleshy. You lean closer. The scent is knit from layers, rendered fat, marrow thick, and the faint whisper of bone. Your heart quickens, but you steady your breath, slow and even. The miracle of meat, rare, holy, once in a season, smells like hope. You tilt the pot slightly, test its weight, and catch a glimpse of the glint within. Something heavier than barley, flecked with fat that glimmers when it catches the light. That gleam inside the pot looks like gold in your mind. Hand steady now, you lighten the flame to a gentle simmer. You let your fingers skim the pot's edge, tasting the aroma without touching flesh. There, in the steam, swirls all the things you didn't know you'd missed so badly. The richness of life, the luxury of flesh, the complexity of something more than grain boiled in water. You turn to your sibling, whose eyes glisten, but whose face remains calm, as though accepting that this moment isn't for talking. The goat shifts at the doorway, almost as if trying to see inside. You imagine its thoughts. Is it mine? Number. Not anything here belongs to you, except for this one fleeting offering. You take up the largest ladle, feel its weight, then dip and scoop. The soup is thicker, richer, tendrils of bubbling broth curling around glistening chunks of meat. Fat beads float like amber jewels on the surface. You smell marrow and smoke and salt, the elemental scents that remind you. This is how humans feasted when the world was still wild. You carry the pot outside, clay bowls contrasting against your rough hands. It is early morning. Mist drapes the yard in silver folds. You place the bowls carefully and fill them. Generous ladles for each person, extra for the dog. The meat isn't yours to claim, but for this morning, it is your duty to distribute it, your purpose and your pride. You hold nothing back. The bowls sit steaming on the table. You watch as your sibling leans forward, breath catching in their chest, nose dipping closer to inhale. The goat noses the edge of your cloak as you pass, and the dog sighs in anticipation. Outside, the neighbor's smoke seems muted today, as if overshadowed. There is no shame in what you are doing. There is only gratitude, threaded into every spoonful. You return to the fire to keep the pot warm. Sparks drift upward like tiny, persistent wishes. You rest your hand on the handle, feeling the gentle pulse of heat. This is quiet abundance, not a feast, but a pause in the hunger. It is a reminder that scarcity isn't absolute, that sometimes the world yields. Slowly, you pick up a spoon of your own. The broth is thick and rich. You hold it against your lips and let the warmth coat your tongue before it slides home. The broth tastes of deep earth, of rendered fat that flickers on your tongue like candlelight, of slow-cooked marrow sweet and layered. It is not buttery, but it is more than grain. It is what you will remember. Your sibling stirs their bowl, spoon tapping the clay. The dog licks his bowl clean. The goat watches. None of it is spoken. You feel deeply that this miracle of meat glimmers in your blood in the form of comfort, temporary, precious, and easily lost. You sit back on the hearthstone. Your bones ache with the meal, as though weighed down by warmth. The fire pulses in sync with your heart. You wonder when the next miracle will come, if at all. You know the answer. It won't. But leaning into this moment feels necessary, even if you know you should prepare for empty bowls again. The pot simmers, a quiet heartbeat in the dim longhouse. The floorboards beneath your feet seem softer today. The straw smells richer, dusted with meat scent. You press your cheek against the cool rim of the hearth, feeling the rough texture of the stone fill your cheekbone with cold, contrasting the heat in your belly. Outside, the yard is slowly brightening. Mist is lifting. A breeze drifts in, carrying the tang of smoke and earth, what you just tasted in liquid form. You inhale deeply, as though trying to distill the smell into memory. You close your eyes. The miracle blooms inward, a slow ease in the marrow of your bones. For once, hunger recedes instead of treading on your chest. For once, the household sits quietly, not content, but less afraid. You rise, take the empty pot outside to rinse, and let the water drip over cracked clay. The trickle carries away grease, but not the memory of warmth. That remains, like embers stored beneath coals, ready to kindle again, if only in your mind. The goat meanders off. The dog follows, bell rung, satisfied. You stand in the doorway, the longhouse breathing behind you, smoke rising, warmth shining through cracks, the embers waiting to die or to reignite tomorrow's fire, depending on what you bring to it. Your belly hums with the meal. You press a hand there, then lift one to the morning light. You are not full, but you are sated enough to walk forward, enough to remember that even in scarcity, the world sometimes offers a gift. You step into the yard, leaving behind chairs, bowls, and the lingering aroma of meat. Hunger will return, but so will you, the cook, the keeper of small miracles. And that, you whisper to yourself, is never as fragile as a single feast. You rise from the cramped stone floor, your body stiff with cold and longing, and each breath feels like breathing through a sieve of regret. The dim corridor beyond your cramped chamber carries muted sound, voices, laughter, clinking cups, the low hum of music. You know what it means. Feasting. A world away from your bowl of raw onion and stale barley. A world where spices drift like clouds and flesh with skin is stitched onto bones you can't name. And yet it remains on the other side of a wall that trembles with joy you aren't invited to. The air around you is heavier this night. You drag a woolen shawl tighter around your shoulders, praying its thin fibers will hide the ache of hunger that gnaws quietly at your ribs. By your window, You place your hand against the cold wood, feeling soft candlelight leak through old gaps, the golden glow painting your worn cheek. You almost taste it, warm butter sliding across bread, sweet honey dripping off skewered fowl. You almost hear it, deep mirth rising in waves, voices thick with indulgence. You almost smell it, glazed meat, roasted nuts, spiced wine igniting the air. Almost. Beneath your feet, the house hums with correspondence to the feast. Each step on the creaking floor echoes a kind of quiet envy, a resonance between your foot and the far-off dancing. Somewhere up the spiral staircase, the Lord's steward huffs past, carrying a jug so heavy its breath rattles down the wall. Somewhere beneath you, a servant squirms with a tray so laden it strains his muscles. You hear their shifting, barely audible above your own heartbeat, and you wonder what they taste tonight. You wonder if they feel the same cold in their chest when their back turns. In the corridor, you pause. Your fingertips graze the lint-streaked tapestry, an old depiction of horned helmets and triumphant hunts, a memory of pride that feels foreign against your skin. You close your eyes and let the tapestry press you into its story. You feel strong at first, like the women weaving that cloth, their fingers stretched tight with purpose. But then you feel empty, as though the fibers themselves are hungry, unraveling silently while you watch. And in that unraveling, you feel your own edges fraying too, worn thin by silence and want. You press forward, drawn toward the door that glimmers with torchlight. Each footfall treads on that thin floorboard's honesty. They creak, softly, signs of weight, signs of presence. In your mind, you orchestrate your approach. 3 steps, pause, 2 steps, listen. The music pulses, but not wildly, just enough to remind you that far-off laughter tastes like salt on your tongue. It's not raucous. This feast isn't a festival. It's measured, refined, just out of reach. Like a bird calling through a window, bright and uncatchable. Then you reach the door. You don't open it. Instead, you rest your ear against its dark oak surface. Beneath the muffled laughter there is a moment's silence in the caravan of voices, as if a carriage crests the hill and pauses before rolling on. In that silence, you hear the clink of goblets setting down. You hear spiced wine sloshing. You hear the scrape of chairs, like scraping wool across stone. You hear someone exhale delight, or permission, or contentment. You can't tell which. But it rings through you, a bell of absence. Slowly, you press your palm to that warmth, feeling the fire's prayer through the grain. Behind it, a hearth is roaring bright enough to wiggle the flames through polished wood. Behind it, the Lord smiles. Behind it, gilded spoons dip honeyed meat. But you feel only the cold edge of the door, the hush of your bones, the ache of exclusion. You want to touch that light. You want to taste that richness. But there is only this, your own cup, empty, abandoned on a stool by the hearth of your own hovel. You pull back, breaking the contact, and the tapestry behind you rustles, a sound more alive than the distant splendor. In the hallway, the floorboards quiet. Even the rats hush. Somewhere above, the feast continues, oblivious to your presence. You imagine the steward pressing the final toast, the murmur of applause, the scent of roast tightening in the rafters. You imagine the music shifting to a slow melody, and the goblets raising against polished shields. In your imagination, for a moment, your lips brush warmth. Then you turn away. Your step is slow, deliberate, like weaving someone else's story into your bones so that it won't leave you shivering in the dark. The firelight retreats behind the walls, and with each step it fades out of your dreams. The corridor grows colder, quieter. Your shawl pulls tighter on your shoulders. Your ribs rise, lifting breath like a bellows in a smithy, urgent, necessary. In your dim room, you stand by the earthen hearth that barely glows. You pick up your own small bowl, a cracked thing, soot blackened around the rim. In it is your supper, half a turnip, shaved thin, a spoonful of lukewarm broth darkened from the barrel, the ring of stale onion. You chew it slowly, mustering gratitude. It tastes faint, like memory of meals past and meals promised. It tastes of salt you can't store. It tastes of fuel for a body that refuses to die, even if its spirit keeps slipping. You taste each fragment. You taste the cold, the hunger, the tremble of your own jaw, firm only because it must be. You taste the dim hope that tomorrow might bring a loaf less stale, a scrap of cheese more generous. You taste the fear that tomorrow you may hear feast again, but know you'll never see it. Tomorrow you might stand by a different door, feel the same ache. Tomorrow you might discover you are made of longing. As the broth warms your throat, the shadows gather. Your fingers clutch the edge of the bowl, the porcelain rough against your palm. You swallow and feel the broth slide over hollow ribs, filling spaces you didn't know were empty. You close your eyes and feel the warmth linger there, teasing memory of feasts. But you stay in the silence because it's safer here. Because joy you don't earn is grief in disguise. You rise and set the bowl aside. You let the blanket fall around your shoulders. The candle beside you flickers, trembling in the draft. You imagine that breeze carries laughter up your nose, down your spine. You imagine it fills your lungs with the taste of honeyed fowl. But when you breathe fully, you taste only smoke and stone and hunger. You lean back, shoulders braced against the wall, and let the dark draw around you like wool. You sink into its weight. The door that holds the feast is far away now, soundless, starless, locked in laughter you'll never join. Beyond your window, the night closes with the hush of winter's promise, cold, quiet, empty, and yet strangely comforting in its honesty. Your eyelids tremble shut as you sink deeper into the hush. In that space between hunger and sleep, the memory of warmth glows faint and distant, like embers buried under ash, waiting to die or spark. You feel them, hidden in the dark, beneath the hush of your bones, and as your breath slows, drawing you toward silence, you sense the next chapter creeping through the cracks. What it will taste like, feel like, cost. The tapestry rustles, the candle gutters, and in that gentle ending, the memory of the feast lingers like a promise you don't yet believe. Soft breath, soft shadow, soft hunger, linger a while before you go. And tomorrow, you will stand by another door, softly carrying the ache of the feast you heard but didn't taste. You stand in the pale early light of dawn, stepping over the crumbling threshold of your mud brick home. The air is thick with damp, a heavy breathing thing that closes around you like a cloak sewn tight with mildew. Your boots, dust-stained and bowed, scuff against the earth floor, stirring motes in the weak morning glow. Hunger pulls at you again, curious and familiar, but today the pantry offers only uncertainty. Inside the shadowed storage niche, dark sacks lean against the wall, bulging with the hopes of yesterday. Straw, barley, lentils, and whatever root vegetables you managed to salvage from last season lie in silent vigil, each whispering in its own language. Eat me, or leave me. The air hums with mildew and rot, spoilage that humbles you more than the feast ever could. You remember once thinking that mold was just fuzz, but here it is a living thing, breathing with its own insistence, creeping over your provisions with quiet conquest. You kneel and peer inside the first sack, a meager pillow of barley. You reach in, fingertips brushing damp kernels that stick to your skin like small stones of regret. Each grain is damp, swollen, translucent. Some burst at your touch, releasing bittersweet juice that tastes like last night's sweat. You hold one close to your nostril. The scent puffs out like a sigh, damp straw and something sour just beyond your memory. Your stomach twists. It's familiar. this queasy dance with ruin. Without tools, without certainty, you must decide survival or sickness. Your hand trembles as you tip a handful into your bowl, shaking the rest back into the sack. They spill with a hushed rustle, like secrets you don't want to hear. This is the art of medieval pittance. Grain that begs mercy, meat that pleads for preservation, and roots that chuckle quietly at your attempts to coax life back into them. You feel foolish, desperate, standing here with dusty cuffs and bowed shoulders, hoping faded barley will grant another day of warmth. A cough drifts in from the next hut. Your sibling, hunched over a bowl of stale gruel already. They've likely tasted mold worse and lived, but their cough shakes them like an apology. You want to comfort them, but your hands are full, literally, with uncertain food. The rat scratching beneath the floor murmurs like a conspirator. It's waiting, too, for your scraps. You pause to weigh your options. Soak the barley overnight in hopes it will spring back. Or toss it entirely and open the sack of lentils, maybe better off, maybe worse. The thought lands in your chest like a stone. You realize that every day is a gamble, and sometimes the house wins. You choose lentils because at least they look whole, though their skin is wrinkled, ghosted by white spider veins of fungus. Your fingers hover. Your stomach hollers. Time stretches while you decide. In the distant kitchen, the goat bleats softly, your one living creature, who watches you with flat, unblinking eyes, perhaps judging your feeble attempts at self-care. Or maybe it just wants its morning feed. You spoon lentils into a pot of cold water settling on the ancient hearth embers, and drop in a stray garlic clove that you buried in the corner of your hut days ago. The garlic has gone soft and slight with mold, but the scent promises something earthy, something less humiliating than plain starch. Once the pot simmers, the smell rises, beige lentils, garlic musk, and the quiet ghost of decay. You let it bubble with a hushed hiss, stirring occasionally with a wooden stick dry and splintered at the end. You taste as it cooks, a spoonful against the weight of hope. It tastes like hunger rinsed in warm water, seasoned with necessity. Somehow, it is enough. As the lentils cook, you shift your attention back to the barley sack. A singular kernel caught between splinters of wood, the size of a thumb's nail, coated in fuzzy mold. It stares back at you like a question you can't answer. Do you eat it? Or is this the one that kills you? Maybe the goat already ate worse and survived. Or maybe vermin carried sickness here before dawn. You lean in, recalling modern phones that beep when milk sours in the fridge. Back then, there was only the smell, and your nose had to be smarter than you wished it could be. You decide to leave it. You press the barley sack closed and tie it with thin rope, setting it aside as if that simple act could mark the boundary between ruin and safety. It feels ritualistic, damnation confined to fragile fibers. It feels necessary. By mid-morning, the lentils are thick. You add a trickle of broth from yesterday's carcass brine, gulped down by the goat the night before, but enough remains. The pot glimmers a muddy gold. You serve a portion into your bowl, dropping in shards of stale bread. The bread is leather-like, soaked into a sponge by moisture, but it adds structure. You pick up the bowl and sit near the hearth, where the goat pads in for scraps, stepping on straw and clacking its hooves. Not gentle, but certain. You watch the goat chew, green drool hanging in beads from its lips, and wonder if it has any illusions about what it's eating. Maybe it is happier than you, digging into the refuse of humanity. Even its drool carries a comfort you envy, the certainty that you can still taste something, still chew without thinking of death. Every spoonful you take is cold garlic and disintegrating bread, warmed by embers and mixed with the iron tang of mildew. You swallow deliberately, holding each bite until the memory of hunger dulls. You sigh, the lentils settling in your belly like a promise. Not satisfaction, but survival. When the bowl is empty, you scrape the bottom, catching a lingering soft crumb. You chew it, slow, and let it dissolve on your tongue, a tribute to endurance, to needing less, because there is no more. The goat nudges the bowl. You lift it for one final scrape. Even you are aware how small a ritual this is, how intimate and old it is. Scraping bowls to silent witnesses in the mud-walled dim. The midday sun slants low through the shutter cracks, drawing long, sleepy stripes across the floor. Everything is gray. Lentils, walls, breath settling in hushed trails around your calves. Even your thoughts wrap themselves in quiet, practical desperation. You consider your next move. Store what's left of the lentils. If nothing spoils overnight, you might survive tomorrow. Consider boiling water for tea, though no leaves grow here. You might sip cold water and feel plain breathing. Outside, the neighbor coughs again, and the faint clink of spoons in her own courtyard drifts through the wall. You imagine her in her own uncertainty, tasting decay under different nails. You think that tonight she will eat something similar, and so will you. Despite the ache, you are not alone. Even mold is shared, even regret connects. You rise to tend next to the hearth, poking at embers and letting them sigh into ash. The garlic lentil smell lingers, like a promise of halfway comfort. Dust motes drift in the beams, each one a memory of sunbeams past, each one a small rebellion against the damp. You let them float. There is no need to chase them. They will settle again. When the ash cools, you brush it aside, scattering it toward the doorway. You glance at the barley sack again before closing your eyes, tracing lines of mildew in your mind. One day you might find a clean purchase of grain. Until then, your senses sharpen. Your nose humbles you. Your stomach teaches you humility. Your breath reminds you of life. You lie down on the floor near the hearth, leaving just enough space for the goat to rest its muzzle beside your foot. You let your mind drift through the house, past the stale bread box, the empty bowl, the shadows of every meal you didn't have. There is something soothing in the shared hunger that binds you to the goat and to every neighbor coughing through walls. Your eyelids grow heavy under the weight of damp air and quiet resilience. You feel the rumor of tomorrow, uncertain but expected. Next night's lentils, next dawn's breath. You drift, the world narrowing to the ache in your belly and the soft rise and fall of goats breathing nearby. In that hush, you sense the next chapter creeping, salt, cold, root cellar terrors. But now, in the ache of mold and guesswork, there is a quiet victory. You ate, you felt, you tasted, and despite spoiling things and risking sickness, you still stand. Your breath slows, warmth spreads through chest and bones. Even ash at your back feels like a keepsake of survival. Soft breath, soft mold, soft hope that tomorrow might be less uncertain. And now you rest beside a grateful creature, wrapped in damp ash and weary triumph. You emerge from the lean ache of spoilage and guesswork, still tasting mildewed lentils when you step into the hush of early morning's wan light through shutter slats. The air is salt-scented already, a promise that the day will pivot on crystalline granules hidden in jars and jars of hope. Your feet press on the cool stone threshold, and you cuff your hands through thick woolen sleeves before sliding open the wooden door. Outside, the dew lies like melted sweat across the courtyard stones, each drop catching light like a fleeting glimmer, a fleeting promise. Salt is life here, and you have learned it is harder to come by than warmth. You go to the storage nook where the clay jar rests, half buried in straw. Your fingers brush the coarse rim, feeling the imprint of the potter's thumb in the clay. A reminder that someone once devoted patience and skill to make this thing that now holds not luxury, but survival. You lift the jar with both hands, careful not to let straw or spilled grain burden the rim. Once settled, you knock twice on the salt's dense surface, whispering a silent apology for your need. Each grain clinks, a soft, tinny echo, like an ember flickering before dying. You press all 10 fingertips against the surface, feeling the shards of mineral coldness, believing it might ward off the ache of blandness. Salt is the real gold because it draws water from bodies and land alike, because without it, food tastes like dust and battlefields taste like betrayal. You unscrew the wooden lid, it's warped slightly with humidity, and lean in. The scent is sharp, cleansing, sharp enough to bite your memories of yesterday's stale pottage, to sharpen the dull ache in your lower back, to remind you that you still feel. You scoop a small pinch between thumb and forefinger, tasting it dry first. A flash of memory, salty tears you didn't cry, the iron tang of old wounds. You swallow, and it dissolves like a memory slipping beneath the tongue, leaving a small, silent triumph in its wake. You carry the jar to the hearth, where the embers from last night still linger. You warm a clay pot of water until it simmers. The steam pitches your face with salt and recall. You pinch more into the pot, drizzling granules to taste, to test. The water grows heavier, fuller, tasting of tears and sea air, even though you haven't seen the sea in months. You stir with a wooden spoon that creaks, and the water glimmers with wet diamonds. You lean in, cup your hands, and sip. The warmth of salt water sneaks past your lips, past your throat. It is sharp but welcome, smoothing out the ragged edges of your hunger. This is the best taste you've had in days. Holding the pot, you move to the table where stale bread waits. The bread is crumbly, coarse like stone, but salt transforms it. You tear off a corner, press it into the softened crust of pottage, and let it absorb. The salt seeps into the fibers, coaxing flavor from rough bread and tepid broth, conjuring satisfaction from barrenness. You close your eyes for a moment because it is almost too good to be real. At least there is salt to remind you that you are still here, still breathing, still capable of taste. A cough drifts through the thin walls, a reminder of your sibling near the hearth in the corner. You think of how salt stings wounds and preserves flesh, how it can kill as easily as it can cure, depending on context. In your house, a single life saved by salted broth feels like a miracle. You rise and offer them the broth in your mind, though words are absent here. You return to your seat and lick the rim of your bowl, mindful of sharing. The morning passes in dust and salt, in the drip of water from steaming pots. You open the jar again, tasting grain by grain, cashing them against your tongue like small promises. You think of how in modern times people crave sugar and caffeine, but here sugar is war, and caffeine is richer than gold. Salt is the constant. It seasons, it preserves, it heals and harms with equal measure. Your hand lingers on the empty hearth as you let embers fade. You scoop the salt jar, wrap it inside a scrap of wool, and tuck it beneath the table, a silent treasure. You step outside to feel the sun's ghost warmth on your face. You taste the air again, salt and dust, and maybe a memory of the sea drifting inland on some past wind. Enough for now. You lie on your mat by the hearth, the salt jar tucked close by, the taste still lingering on your tongue. Shadows grow long again, and the world outside is quieting. You inhale the air, tasting grainy salt dust, and let your body settle around the small comforts. Tonight, you will fall asleep with salt on your breath and hunger softened into something you can bear, because salt is more than seasoning. Salt is gold, is life, is the promise of more tomorrow. Soft breath salted with hope drifts off under heavy lids as another day closes gently around you. You press your palm against the cold plank door of the root cellar and let the winter chill seep into your bones, reminding you that this gamble, choosing a root from the dark, may decide tonight's supper or tonight's stomach ache. You slide open the door on ancient, creaky hinges that mourn each shift of your weight, feeling the sweet, musty breath of damp autumn buried beneath earth. The air hits your face like a wet cloth, thick with the smell of soil, decay, and something vaguely alive. It tastes faintly of moss, and yesterday's harvest gone still. A scent so familiar, it feels like an old bruise. Your boots crunch on straw and pebbles as you descend the stone steps, careful not to let your woolen skirt brush the walls and pick up damp. The cellar is cloaked in shadows that pool in the corners and hide the shapes of barrels and baskets. Silent, patient. You carry a single lantern, its flame so weak it quivers in the musty darkness, casting light like a prayer. You set it on a rough-hewn shelf, the glow trembling across rows of earthenware jars and burlap sacks. Somewhere beyond the lantern's glow, earth presses in, hushed and eternal, and you feel both comforted and claustrophobic. Each root lies under its own shroud of straw. Turnips, carrots, parsnips, beets, each with its own fate. Your hand drifts over the straw, grazing bulbs that once sprouted from sun-warmed fields and now lie dormant in the chill, waiting to be chosen. You pause at a clump of turnips that look whole enough but weigh less than expected, their skin puckered. You lift one, brushing off straw, and feel the soft give under your fingers. You imagine the blade slicing through it, the crisp crack unleashing soil scents tangled with cold breath. You tuck it into your basket and move on. A rat scurries across the floor, dark, quick, unsettling. You freeze, the lantern's flame pitching wildly. In that moment you realize you are never alone in this cellar. The creature pauses, its whiskers quivering, then slips into the rot dark beyond. You think of your sibling upstairs, curled under furs, sleeping, or at least trying to, trusting you to return with something more appetizing than pottage for supper. Your fingers find a carrot next, stubby, with hints of orange beneath a layer of earth, leaning toward firm. You grasp it, feeling the ridged skin rub raw under your fingernails. You sense determination in its form. It has faced frost, hunger, perhaps more neglect than you can fathom, and still persists. You tuck it away, the weight of it reassuring, though taste, you know, will satisfy only until tomorrow. You edge toward deeper shelves where cabbage heads lie clumped in straw pillows. One is enormous, survived longer than the others, with only faint fraying. You lift it, careful to keep your balance on the damp stones. Its outer leaves rustle beneath your hands, a scent stronger than the rest, the sharp tang of pack that's almost gone too far toward rot. You taste that smell on your tongue by careful memory, not consumption, and let your mind weigh, planning whether tonight's meal might risk splintered guts or hold survival's grace. You settle for a smaller one instead, cleaner, less potent. You feel a troop of shadows shifting as if the cellar itself breathes around you, sleeping under blankets of earth. You reach for parsnips now. They are pale ghosts in the lantern's gleam, slender and brittle. You carefully select one that feels neither too limp nor too rigid, your senses tuned to subtle cues that may betray spoilage. You recall how in summer you fingered fresh parsnips warm from the soil, silk smooth. Now metamorphosis has softened that memory to dull ache. The flesh is frigid in your grip. You layer them all, turnip, carrot, parsnip, cabbage, holding a canton of survival. As you rise toward the stairs, basket cradled, the lantern's glow seems paltry against the cellar's vast darkness. Each step upward presses damp into the soles of your shoes, and a tendril of steam curls from your lungs. You linger at the threshold for a moment, looking back into the hush where your breath might drift away if you lean too close. You resist. You keep hold of the gift of warmth. Daylight stabs the cellar's mouth as you emerge, and your eyes blink at the sudden brightness. The courtyard's frozen breath spreads like a white haze. You carry your basket across the stones, each root sending a small shiver into your palms, a silent pulse of life. The world has wrapped itself in cold, but inside the fire waits. You set the roots beside the hearth. The flames leap to life as you bank the embers left from yesterday, coaxing orange warmth to chase away the chill. A breeze rattles the shutters, Slits of moonlight cross the floor in drifting bars. Your roots lie in quiet repose, waiting. You hold the first parsnip near the flame, charred edges softening into warmth before slicing begins. Beneath your hands, the knife's weight is steady, indifferent, more reliable than hunger. You slice each root into slices that fill a pot of water. The liquid gleams in the lantern's glow, turning pale sienna as roots bleed color. The smell is subtle, earthy, and comforting in its cowardice. Not a feast, but not a punishment. You drop the vegetables into simmering water, and the dull thrum of bubbling warms you. It takes the chill from your fingers and breath from the cold that clung to your bones. You lean close. Your reflection wavers in the pot's surface. You look tired, your cheeks hollow, your hair limp. But there is life in your eyes, life and the candlelight. The pot steams. You lift your chin, letting the vapor graze your face. Inhaling that simmer is like breathing in patience, endurance, the quiet ache that carries you through winter. You remember days past when you had spice, honey, meat. Now the world narrows to winter roots and straw-buried hope. You stir the pot with a wooden spoon, the sound soft but constant, like a heartbeat in empty fields. Your sibling appears at the door, drawn by the sound. They stand unsteady, the chill clinging to skin and bone. You invite them forward, noticing how the hush of the house feels warmer now. You spoon a portion of thin broth into a rough clay bowl. They wrap both hands around it, finding immediate comfort. The aroma shifts. Who knew boiled root could smell like peace? They lift the bowl to sip, and feed returns in small, generous mouthfuls. Not grand, but enough. Night grows deeper as the pot empties. You feel the ache in your back and legs from digging and sorting earlier, but there is a soft gratitude in this ache, for the roots beneath your hands and the bowl in their hands. A low hum of domestic quiet settles as embers shrink into ash. Outside, winter's breath rattles shutter and thatch, but here life holds form. You wipe your bowl with straw scraps, cast scraps to the fire, and clean the spoon by licking it. Dinner is done. The table rests empty but for crumbs of memory. Your skin warms beneath furs. You feel the peat under your soles, the blade of the knife at your belt, the slack of wood chair beneath you. A goat bleats once in the night beyond the wall, and you close your eyes at the sound. Half reassurance, half reminder of life continuing elsewhere. In this deep winter moment, with roots subdued and fire held close, you find a fragile peace. The cellar door swings shut in your mind, earth shielding cold, ice and root held safely. You breathe in the slow grate of ash and ember, taste the faint salt of tears and sweat. Let them settle like sleep. As the embers die, you sense the world settling in around you again, hushed by snowfall and time. A breath escapes you, a gentle surrender to warmth and quiet patience. And tomorrow, you will return to that dark, fearful place of roots, roulette and ruin. But tonight, you are here. You are warm. You are enough. Softly, your lids graze shut. The quiet hum of winter lingers as roots and hearth merge into the hush of night. The warmth of the hearth is a lie. It flickers and crackles in the corner, but the heat never seems to reach you. Not really. It prefers the smoke to your skin, letting it curl up and cling to the thatch like an awkward guest who never leaves. You crouch beside the pot anyway, because this is what the day offers. The endless anticipation of boiling something until it resembles surrender. That's the trick with food here. You don't cook it so much as coax it into giving up. It's not so much a recipe as it is a ritual of endurance. You toss in whatever hasn't molded, dried out, or been eaten by someone quicker. An onion with 2 good layers left. A sliver of dried fish that's more scent than substance. A turnip that might have once dreamed of being a carrot. You drop them into the water without ceremony, watching each piece vanish below the scum-flecked surface. The pot groans softly as it warms, and you can already tell the result will be beige. Not golden, not creamy. Beige. The color of defeat. You've stopped expecting flavor. Now you simply hope for warmth and a mouthfeel that doesn't make you gag in front of your aunt again. She's still upset about the last incident, though she pretended not to notice. But she noticed. She always does. Your knees ache as you shift to stoke the coals. The fire is sullen this morning, and your fingers tingle from the cold as you coax it to life again with a splintered reed and a bit of prayer. You wonder, vaguely, if the reed has more flavor than the root vegetables it's helping to boil. You wonder if flavor is even a real thing, or just a story the wealthy tell each other after they've had too much wine. Someone behind you sneezes, loudly, wetly. You don't even turn to look. If you reacted every time someone sneezed, coughed, or expelled a troubling noise in this household, you'd never get anything done. You just sigh, stir the pot, and scrape the wooden spoon along the bottom, where everything likes to hide. It's important to keep the bottom from burning. Burnt bits taste like guilt and charcoal, and they linger for hours after the meal is over. You're not alone in the room, but no one really talks in the mornings. Words are expensive when the air still smells of cold sweat and damp wool. Your sister is tucked into a corner trying to repair her sock for the third time this week. She's stabbing at the fabric like it insulted her in the night. She probably dreams of better socks. You dream of butter. Dreams are free, at least. The pot bubbles louder now, and you lean forward to sniff. It smells like boiled ambition. The fish has dissolved into some oily promise of protein. The onion has melted away all its bite. The root is just present. Its contribution is mostly structural, like a table leg made of food. You stir again and sigh. At least it's edible. Probably. There's always a risk, but at this point, what isn't? A neighbor passes by the open doorway and glances in. She says nothing, but you feel her judgment like a draft. You know she's got dried herbs tucked away, maybe even a salt pebble hoarded from a better month. She probably boils her food with a touch of smugness. You hate her in that casual, seasonal way that keeps the blood warm. The pot lets out a wet belch, and you know it's ready. Not done, just ready. There is no done here, just a point at which the food no longer resists. You dip a ladle into the broth and fill a chipped bowl with whatever didn't escape to the bottom. You hand it to your younger cousin, who accepts it like it's a gift and not just thermal delay. You serve yourself next and settle down by the hearth with a blanket that smells like mildew and resignation. The first bite is always the worst. Your mouth prepares for flavor, which is a mistake. There is none. Just temperature and texture and a faint whiff of something almost nutritious. The second bite is easier. By the third, you've stopped caring. By the fourth, you're thinking about tomorrow's meal and whether there will be anything left to boil besides the blanket. It's always soup. Even when it's stew, it's soup. Even when it's porridge, it's soup. You could boil a stone in this house and someone would eat it. You probably have, if you're being honest. There was that one particularly chewy bite last month that no one talked about. Still, it's warm. It fills you, even if it doesn't nourish you. There's a strange comfort in the sameness of it, like a bad song you hum because silence feels worse. Outside, the wind flutters against the shutter. It sounds like someone sighing. You know the goats are huddled together for warmth in the lean-to, probably plotting a coup. One of them got into the grain sack last week and hasn't looked you in the eye since. You suspect that goat knows something you don't. A log collapses in the hearth, sending a puff of smoke directly into your eyes. You blink, cry a little, and pretend it's just the smoke. It's always the smoke. You pull your shawl tighter and lean over your bowl again. It's still warm, still edible, still the closest thing you'll get to comfort today. Your cousin has finished their portion and is now licking the bowl with the enthusiasm of someone who still believes there's joy to be found at the bottom. You admire the optimism. You remember it. You don't feel it anymore, but you remember. Later, you'll scrub the pot clean with sand and cold water until your fingers go numb. You'll mutter about how the turnip never really softened, how the fish turned to foam, how the onion left its ghost but not its body. You'll scrape the last bits of skin and broth from the sides and wonder what tomorrow's pot will look like. Probably beige, probably worse. But for now, you're warm. The broth sits in your belly like a sleeping dog, and the fire snaps softly behind you. Your sister's sock has given up entirely, and she curses under her breath while threading another needle. The goats have begun to bleed again, which means someone has stepped in something unfortunate. You lean back against the wall, feel the rough grain of it against your spine, and close your eyes just for a moment. The soup was enough. Not good, not satisfying, but enough. Enough to keep the cold at bay and the hunger from screaming. Enough to make it through until the next pot. And with that slow sinking thought, your mind drifts quietly to what might be coming next. A celebration, perhaps, and the rumor of butter. The faintest clink of a clay pot breaks the usual hush of the evening, followed by a hush-hush whisper passed between someone older and someone small. You don't lift your head. There's no energy for that. But something's different tonight, and your body, conditioned by deprivation, notices before your mind can label it. It's not that you're hungry. Hunger is a given, a hum in the marrow of your bones. It's that for once, someone is trying to make something feel like enough. There's a smell wafting in slow spirals, curling like hope, dangerous and unwarranted, fat sizzling, something thicker than gruel, something that suggests generosity, or at least a brief lapse in strict resource guarding. You blink at the wall. It doesn't blink back. A festival, maybe. You've lost track of which saint or solstice or grain blessing is due. The church calendar is a tangle of obligatory abstinence punctuated by moments of sanctioned joy, most of which arrive like rumors, too late, too faint, and never for your benefit. You remember someone murmuring that a cousin's neighbor's sister made a loaf of bread with lard last year, and the whole family fainted from disbelief before recovering to chew in reverent silence. Now, your corner of the dwelling stirs with the rest of the household, like sheep nudging one another before a storm. Someone's unwrapping something wrapped in cloth. There's a scraping of the bottom of a pot. That's how you know it's serious. Someone's gone down to the bottom. Butter is not a regular feature of your diet. It exists in the cultural imagination like treasure or unicorns. It is spoken of in parables, in the same breath as feasts and warm hearths and second helpings. When it appears, rarely, it is not so much food as relic. And tonight, someone has unearthed a small hunk of it, possibly traded for a favor, possibly stolen, possibly the result of a divine miracle involving a cow and a distracted watchman. The color of it, pale yellow, veined with age, is more exciting than the last 7 meals you've eaten combined, which, to be fair, were all various forms of slightly wet bread or disappointing porridge. You sit up slowly, because enthusiasm must never be wasted. The butter is portioned by someone with a knife and a moral dilemma. Too thin, and no one notices it. Too thick, and someone goes without. The person cutting it has the haunted look of a midwife deciding who to save. It spreads like hope that's been refrigerated, reluctant, tearable, and slightly crumbly at the edges. You take your piece on a flat hunk of barley bread. It's cold and stiff and tastes like flour, but the butter transforms it, just enough. For one moment, your mouth recognizes richness. Your brain lights up like it's just remembered how to feel joy. You don't smile. That would be greedy. But you do sigh, and you let the salt and fat cling to your tongue like a hymn you half remember. The rest of the meal is still what you expect. A thin stew made from lentils that gave up weeks ago. An onion shared between 3 people. Boiled greens that taste like morning. But none of that matters, because the butter happened. The taste lingers longer than it deserves to, clinging to the insides of your cheeks like a story you don't want to end. You try not to lick your fingers, not because it's rude, it's not here, but because you want to pretend there's more. Pretend the flavor might return, like a wandering dog with half a conscience. But it doesn't. It never does. That was it. Around you, the household settles into the kind of silence that only follows a rare gift. Not full bellies, those remain a fantasy, but a brief numbing of want. Even the nosiest sibling doesn't speak. Even the goat, who has learned the art of passive-aggressive bleating, seems to withhold its usual complaints. You lean back against the wall. It's uneven and slightly damp, the texture of neglect. But you let your head rest anyway, because that one mouthful has temporarily made you generous with discomfort. You're not full, not close, but you are warmed, and warmth in this place often counts for more than food. You remember a celebration from years ago, or maybe you dreamed it, where a neighbor claimed to have tasted honey, real honey, golden, sticky, not the kind you imagine while chewing reeds. The neighbor swore it made his ears ring and his fingers twitch. Of course, he died the following season, probably unrelated. But that memory, or myth, has lived longer than most people here. That's what food does when it's rare enough. It turns into folklore. A pat of butter becomes legend. A handful of nuts becomes a tale passed down with embellishment and reverence. You think about that as you chew on the last bit of your barley scrap, scraping crumbs from the cracked palm of your hand. You suck them in with a sound that would be impolite in polite company. Not that you've ever been in such company. The fire is low now, and so is the energy. Celebrations are exhausting, not because of dancing or music. Those are for the wealthy. No, they drain you because they remind you how much you're usually denied. That mouthful of richness has made every other food in your life retroactively worse by comparison. There's no real way to preserve butter. Not here, not properly. It's not meant to last. You already know that tomorrow's stew will be just like yesterday's. Brown, beige, and committed to disappointment. The butter was borrowed time, and time always comes for its dues. But for now, you wrap yourself in the illusion that the taste still lingers, that maybe there's a scrap hidden somewhere you missed. You roll onto your side and let the woven mat scratch your skin in its familiar way. One corner curls under your foot like a mocking reminder of everything that doesn't quite work. Still, tonight was different. Just enough to feel like something happened. Just enough to imagine what it would be like if every day contained even the smallest luxury, the kind with flavor. You wonder briefly if that's what festivals are for. Not joy, not praise, just the illusion that something is possible. And then you feel it, the hunger returning, creeping back into the corners of your stomach like a thief coming home. It's patient. It knows it always wins. By the time the last embers have given up their faint red glow, the warmth has gone from your limbs, and the taste, that fleeting golden softness, is only a concept. Your tongue can no longer recall it. Your mind tries, the way it tries to remember the smell of someone you once loved. But it fades, slowly, and then, all at once. The mat beneath you creaks with every shift, though it has no right to. It's made of dry reeds, not wood. Still, it complains like an old friend you never liked much but need anyway. Your shoulder itches, your belly aches, and the wind outside has turned sharp again, as if it knows celebration has ended and resumed its usual task of making you uncomfortable. The others breathe around you, a chorus of snores and sniffles and restless muttering. Someone coughs, the same someone who always coughs. And you hear the faint rustle of a mouse trying to determine whether the crumbs in the corner are worth the risk of being noticed. And you lie there, not full, not warm, not content, but briefly, remembered. The day gave you something, and you clutched it like a child with a trinket. You held it in your mouth and in your chest and in your sleep. But now it's gone. What lingers now is not butter. It is the absence of butter, the awareness of how rare it was. And tomorrow, your stomach will tighten before your eyes open, because it will know, somehow, that today is not a holy day. Today is nothing. Today is what most days are. You curl tighter, folding around the gap between memory and need. And just before the cold claims your final waking thought, you promise yourself, quietly, foolishly, that you'll find a way to taste it again. Somehow. Even if it takes another season of waiting. But of course, waiting means waking. And waking means eating. And eating, more often than not, means guessing whether the mold is dangerous or not. And so you drift down, gently, reluctantly, into the hunger that always waits beneath your dreams. And just like that, the flicker of celebration is gone. Butter has vanished, crumbs licked from the fingertips of someone faster than you, and your share, if you could even call it that, was more memory than meal. You can still taste the salt in your imagination, the ghost of grease that never made it past your lips. The feast is over. The fire is low. The cold is not. You retreat to the sleeping corner, if you can even call it a corner. It's more of an agreement between the walls and the draft, a patch of straw mashed flat by too many nights and not enough comfort. Your blanket smells like old wool and older people. It hasn't been washed in months, which is a kindness really, because wet wool is worse than hunger. Much worse. Your stomach is not just empty, it's offended. It's performed a full day's labor and received in return a handful of porridge with the nutritional complexity of a wet sigh. There was talk of a turnip stew. There is always talk. The stew never materializes, and now your body is negotiating with itself, conserving, rationing, pretending. It grumbles like a betrayed friend. You lie down in the dark, the kind of dark that doesn't just obscure your sight, but erases the idea of light entirely. One tallow candle remains across the room, flickering defiantly, a lonely puddle of yellow trying to survive the cold. Someone coughs near the door. Someone else shifts in their bedding with the sound of straw scratching straw. You pull the blanket tighter and breathe through your mouth. The safer option, though it invites the taste of must and mildew. The rats are louder tonight. Or maybe you're just listening more. You've named one of them in your head, not out of affection, but because it's easier to yell internally at Gregory than to accept that something with teeth might be crawling near the bread box again. The bread box hasn't held actual bread in 3 days, but the rats are hopeful, if nothing else. Your feet are cold. Not cool, not chilly. Cold, as in questioning the nature of life cold. The kind of cold that settles into the joints and builds a nest there. Your toes have not touched warmth since that brief moment near the fire yesterday, when you miscalculated your reach and nearly burned your own skin. You consider pressing your feet into the back of the nearest sibling, but they are asleep, and the retaliation wouldn't be worth the temporary heat. Outside, the wind hisses under the doorframe. It has been arguing with the thatch for hours, and the roof is beginning to sound exhausted. A few flakes of dust fall from above, and you wonder how many winters this roof has seen, how many more it might survive before it gives up and deposits itself directly onto your face. You tug your blanket higher, despite its questionable warmth, and pretend it's thick and luxurious. A soft illusion, like dignity. The scent in the room is a mix of damp wool, tired breath, and faint latrine memory. Your nose has adapted over time, no longer flinching, just registering. You breathe shallowly and shift again, trying to find a position where the straw doesn't poke your hip like a judgmental elbow. You fail. The straw always wins. There's a whisper of movement. Someone scratching themselves with the intensity of someone battling an invisible curse. probably fleas, possibly just boredom. It doesn't matter. You are too tired to care and too hungry to sleep, which is the sort of paradox that would make philosophers weep if they weren't also too hungry to bother. You stare at the darkness behind your eyelids and begin the nightly ritual of imagined meals. You start with figs, ones you've never tasted but have heard described with such reverence that they now live vividly in your dreams. They are soft and bursting, sugar and sun trapped in a skin the color of royalty. Then you move to honey cakes, then meat of any kind, seasoned with something other than desperation. Your brain constructs flavors your tongue doesn't recognize, and your stomach groans like it's mourning something you never had. Your fingers curl into fists beneath the blanket, not out of anger, but to keep them from freezing. The joints feel thick, the nails brittle. Your fingernails have collected more soil than food today, and the skin around them is cracked in a way that promises pain tomorrow. But tonight, the ache is background noise. Somewhere in the room, a child mutters in their sleep. You don't listen for the words, only for the rhythm. It's familiar, human, a reminder that you are not alone in this misery. Togetherness is its own kind of warmth, even when everyone smells like boiled cabbage and poor decisions. You pull your knees up, tucking your chin to your chest like a curled animal. The blanket shifts with you, reluctantly. You close your eyes and try not to listen to your body protesting. The rumble in your gut is met with the creak of wood under someone's restless turn. Your ears adjust to the darkness before your mind does. Every noise is sharper at night. Every thought heavier. You remember the priest once said, "Hunger humbles the soul." You wonder if it also weakens the knees and makes your dreams smell like stew. Your soul doesn't feel particularly humble. It feels empty. But maybe that's the point. Maybe humility lives where fullness cannot. Your breath fogs slightly against the air in front of your face, and you exhale slowly, watching it dissolve. Your stomach has settled into quiet bitterness. You are not full. You are not warm. But you are horizontal. And that is, in this world, a luxury. You drift. Not sleep exactly, more like hovering between complaints, between cold and colder, between hunger and resignation. You chase the memory of figs through a landscape made of groans and dreams and whispers. The fire is low. The rats are quiet now. Even Gregory. You do not sleep, but you are not awake. And somehow, this is enough. Just enough to carry you toward tomorrow, when maybe, just maybe, someone will mention butter again.